Big Week in Gaming, a podcast that dives into gaming news, analysis, and reviews. If you'd like to help contribute to the growth of this podcast and community, please leave us a 5-star review, as it helps people find us. With that said, let's get on with the show.
Shut up! Big Week's on the radio! Shut up! It's Gaming Focused Audio!
Welcome. It's been a big week in gaming. I'm integot, he's Swinny, for episode 5 on Sunday the 16th of August, 2020. In this week's show, we'll be discussing Epic Games' clash with Apple and Google, Halo Infinite being delayed until next year, and our special look back at Donkey Kong Country. Swinny, it's been a big week. Lots of delays, lots of interesting stuff this week.
You say lots of interesting stuff, but it was honestly pretty small snooze week for once. You know, it's against
always
our
a big
podcast
week
name.
in gaming. All right.
I can't down brand this week. I'm sorry. No, I'd say there's one or two big stories, so technically still a big week.
Well, okay, I'm gonna have the counter argument, and we'll get into it shortly. But I think this clash between Epic and Apple and Google is going to be huge. And I think we'll look back and go, actually, this was a bigger week than the hours that we spent on state of plays and things like that about games that are already out.
Oh, what? You don't want to talk about Temtem for 45 minutes again?
PS5 exclusive, or is it? It's coming on the Switch. Yeah. And how's your week been? Busy?
It hasn't been busy. I've just been cracking away at Crosscode still, about 40, 50 hours in. That game is not short. It is a long game.
I really want to get into that game.
I will say it is even better than I thought it would be now. Like, it's gotten great. But
yeah.
I've also been, I started Rage as well as part of our Game of Some Other Year. So id Software's, I wouldn't say, it's not so classic shooter. It's probably not fondly remembered, but at the time it had a lot of buzz. And I will say that game visually holds up. It looks great on PC still. So been cracking away at that. And yeah, I guess just also started Ring Fit Adventure for the first time.
Oh, did you get that? Because I got that, I think it was, when did it come out? For Christmas, I think, last year? Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while. I picked it up a few weeks ago and just finally actually opened it up. And have you actually played it?
Yeah, I played it a lot. Like, I don't hide my status on the Switch. I think I played it for like 15 hours or something like that. So I tried to keep up with it. Look, the thing is, you'll share your experience in a second, but I was keeping it up every day for a while. And I actually, this sounds embarrassing, I kind of injured myself from playing it. Like my knee, I was going too hard and my knee got like a bit creaky. I was like, whoa, this is a bit full on. I got to ease off on this game.
So can I ask, was that because you were doing the silent mode?
No.
Okay.
I just did regular mode.
I'm doing the silent mode because, just for context, I have some nerve damage, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not able to jog. And doing it on the spot for Ring Fit Adventure so your character can move, I thought was going to be very difficult. So they've got a silent option where it's meant to be, okay, you're in an apartment, so you're not making a lot of noise. Where instead of jogging, you're just kind of doing very small squats over and over and over again. But you're doing it so much. And I'm like, oh my God, this doesn't feel like it's going to be good for my knees.
Yeah.
Plus then obviously all the other squat-based exercises when you're actually battling the enemies and everything. But other than that, it's such a well-made game. And it is legitimately a game. It's kind of shocking how much of a game there is to what you'd think is probably a fitness app.
It's so good. I know it's so well rated, but it's just so underrated to me. And I think part of it is they just didn't make enough. Whether they thought, it wasn't going to sell as well as they thought it would. Because, obviously they're going to make so many units, and even when there's insane demand, they can only increase it by a certain amount. But I think that thing would have been double the amount of sales if they were able to sell it. Because I remember chatting to some people at JB Hi-Fi, so they're an Australian retailer for American listeners, a bit like Best Buy, and I kind of got to know a few of them, and one of them was just saying that game is the number one requested item at the time. So this was pre-COVID, in the whole store. And sometimes they had like situations where a person would come up to them and go, "Hey, do you have Ring Fit Adventure?" And they're like, no, sorry. We can't even keep a log of people. It's so long that the person would walk away. And then like a second later, some other random person came up. "Hey, do you have Ring Fit Adventure?" And someone was saying it happened like 4 times in a row, and they thought they were getting trolled, or they're like some YouTube show or something like that. But it's good. You should keep it up. Like the thing I'd say though, and I've got to get back into it, you just got to pace it out, man. And like, I know this sounds so bad. I feel like I am actually unfit, but yeah, you got to pace it out, because I go really hard when I do those kind of things, and man, it was like battering my knees, all the squats and everything. There's so many squats in that game. It's crazy.
Well, going to what you were talking about, the retail demand. Well, when you think about it, a lot of games these days you can get away with just buying them digitally, and that's one of the games where you need the physical component as well. So it makes sense that obviously people can order them online, right?
Yeah, and
I don't know if you can buy the game digitally and just get the Ring Con or whatever it's called separately.
You can't.
So that makes sense that that people were actually likely going to go to retailers to actually try to get it if they can, but obviously it was difficult to. So.
Yeah, so it's only offered physically. You can't even get a digital version of it, and it's pretty obvious why, because people would just make counterfeit versions of it, right? And so then it would drive the cost down to whatever the digital version is, plus $10 or whatever. Although the accessories are really good.
Oh yeah, it's great. I do wish you could download a digital version of it though, so I didn't have to because it's a game you're going to try to play, if not every day, then every couple of days, and just having to constantly swap that cartridge in. We've talked about it before, but that is a great example of, man, I just wish the game part of it was digital. But
yeah,
anyway.
And like I really wish Nintendo had a policy where it's like you'd have to insert it once a week or something, and then it kind of like stays active, if that makes sense. So then you didn't need to put the cart back in. Like something like that, you know what I mean? Like that wouldn't bother me that much if that was the rule, because just like we've had this conversation offline around Smash. Like I'm so on the fence of just buying it digitally, even though I've got the physical version, and maybe trying to sell the my physical and just get the digital and bite the bullet, because I don't know, I'm just so lazy. I want to jump into it every now and then. I'm like, I couldn't be bothered like switching out Paper Mario, which I'm playing, and put that in, or Skyrim. So yeah, just talking about Rage. So I've loaded Skyrim back on the Switch, so I'll try to play that on the Switch, because I figure that is probably a close replica of the PS3/Xbox version of it. I mean, I know it's enhanced, but it's not the PS4/PC version of it. So I'll play it there, because then it sort of helps mix it up versus a lot of the games that I already have on PC that we're going to be going through.
I will say though, unlike a lot of, I guess, remasters, the special edition of Skyrim, I don't think adds much to it that would give you a very different experience. But it is, I understand, like I think the Switch is, what, as you said, a good example of trying to take a snapshot in time, rather than obviously you could go and play it on those consoles, but Switch is a current console, you've got it around all the time, and it's also portable, so that makes sense.
Well, the other thing I've got to recognize is that I've got another baby on the way imminently. Probably by the next time we chat on the podcast, he'll be along, so bring it up to 2 total. And the Switch to me as a dad is just insane. It's like the most important me time device for a dad that you could have, because as opposed to a console, even like booting up my PS4 just takes some time, and no matter what you do, it's just not as convenient as the Switch, because you can just carry it with you. And it actually made me reflect when my first son came along. I remember this because it was really tough time with delivery, very dramatic. And I remember vividly, because I was just like, in a bad headspace, playing Metroid Zero Mission on my 3DS. I don't know why. This is just like so vivid in my head, because I played it and beat it like on the same day. And I was just like, I needed to get my mind off things, and I love Metroid so much. And I'm like, oh, I gotta play something. I'm like losing my mind here. And then I was like, wow, maybe I should load up Fusion on my 3DS and play it. And I was just going, oh, maybe I could play Super Metroid as well on the Nintendo Switch Online. But yeah.
So what you're saying is that Metroid needs to be put in like counselling offices for people suffering from from all manners of stressful events.
Yeah, well, certainly for me. That's definitely my happy place, just going back and playing Super Metroid. I have to admit, I'm surprised I don't go back and play that game more often. Like, I don't know how many times I've beaten it, but I don't have it memorized like a lot of people who are massive fans of it. It's one of those things.
I go back and play it all the time, but I generally don't play it to completion. I'll probably put maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours in, kind of say, oh, I've had enough for now, and then just forget. And then next year I'll do the same thing. But the game's just so good that you start playing it and you just want to play it for like 2 hours straight.
Yeah, like that game, I think I've already mentioned this, but to me, it's my favorite game of all time. And it's just, I'm the opposite. Like, I'll start playing it and I'm like, oh, it's actually very similar to something like Empire Strikes Back. If I start watching that, I'm like, oh, I have to watch the whole thing. Like, I can't, in the old days where you'd watch TV, if it came on, on TV and I was like, oh, whoa, Empire Strikes Back. I'm just like, all right, I guess there goes 2 hours. I'm going to just watch this. And I mean, Super Metroid's about that length. It's about 2 to 3 hours, depending on how quick you can get through it. Like, obviously, speedrunners can do it in more like 20-something minutes. So I'm definitely not going to be that quick. I actually should set myself a goal of like trying to get a competitive time from a speedrunning perspective. That might be a fun thing to do.
Wait, competitive? On one of the most widely speedrun games of all time, you're going to try to get a competitive time.
No. I'm talking about the competitive idea as in like, actually that's tricky. Like that's a top 5% time. Does that make sense? Like, some people, it's like, oh, they can run pretty quick. Now, it's not Olympic pace, but it's like, geez, that's decent. They've done some training. That's kind of like what I'm talking about. Anyway.
Okay, I challenge you to do a reverse boss run of Super Metroid. Start there.
Okay. I might take us into our headliners so I can get away from getting myself into trouble. The trouble that it seems like Apple and Google may have gotten themselves into. So Apple and Google have actually removed Fortnite from the iOS and Google Play stores. And this is all, a very orchestrated situation from Epic Games. I'm not sure how you want to like dice this up. Yeah.
Oh man, this is... I love this story in so many ways because it is so obvious how much Epic has planned this. That the fact that, okay, we'll talk a bit about the timeline events, but the fact that this whole thing, they've even got like a short film, like a pre-rendered Fortnite, cutscene about this. So like this is one of the weirdest things, but it's so interesting in many ways. But maybe we should start from the start.
Yeah. So I think, and when you said that, how orchestrated it is, it's 100% orchestrated. So, going back even further, Tim Sweeney, who runs Epic Games, he's very much about driving down the costs for, transaction fees or service fees or gateway fees. There's lots of different kind of descriptions on what people... But it's really just a fee to play on a storefront. So, you've got Nintendo, you've got PlayStation, Xbox, Apple, Google. They've all got big storefronts, lots of customers, and pretty much standard, it's 30%. Same as on PC even with Steam. So 30% fee. And Tim Sweeney's always been against this. He's hated this because they've always, made engines, made games. So they've always copped the 30% fee. Now, when Fortnite blew up as much as it did and, got that kind of insane amount of cash behind it, literally billions of dollars behind it, they went off and created the whole Epic Game Store just to really compete with Steam. Now, on the iOS side and the Google Play side, it's a massive contributor to Apple and Google. And in gaming in general, like on those storefronts, is huge. Much, much bigger than other categories. And especially that, a lot of the currency that's actually going through. So in Fortnite's case with V-Bucks, it's all made up and you get, a skin, but it's from a cost perspective, it's like nothing. So from a profitability perspective, it's so high. So very strategically Epic. And it was kind of amazing when I watched this happen. They, pushed an update with Fortnite and they then pushed out this whole idea of a mega drop. So fees across every single platform. So including Nintendo, PlayStation and PC, there's going to be a cut of 20% on the actual V-Buck cost to get V-Bucks. So whatever it cost you before, it's going to be 20% cheaper. And then on the Google Play Store and the Apple Store, the App Store, they actually had an alternative way to buy V-Bucks, which is completely against the guidelines. Like, not even against the guidelines. It's like they have been hard on this historically.
This is crazy because the fact that they just go, like, I wonder if Apple or Google knew about any of this at all before they pushed that update, because you can just imagine reaction of like the head of the App Store and whatever in at Google and Apple just being like, they did what? It's kind of crazy them putting in basically like a V-Buck costs whatever $9.99 if you do it this way, but if you do it this way, it costs $7.99. And what, especially when we're talking younger kids, who in their right mind is going to choose a $9.99 option? It's insane. Like, everyone's going to go for the $7.99 option.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I've actually read a lot of, I've gone really deep on this topic because to me, this kind of stuff is super interesting because it's got a business and gaming element. Two things I'm really, really interested in. And, there's been so many examples of Apple pushing back so hard on these things. So even, with Kindle. So if you go the Amazon Kindle, you cannot buy Kindle books on an iPad. So if you're on an iPad, you're in the Kindle app, you can read Kindle books on your Kindle app, but you cannot buy Kindle books. It's not allowed. Because the thing is, Amazon tried to make it so that you could buy it by going via the web, and then Apple blocked it. And they're like, well, okay, we're going to remove the Kindle app. And then Amazon was like, oh, so now the Kindle app actually has this thing that says, if you log on to the Kindle store or like Amazon, you can buy the book and it will appear in the app. So they could do the same thing, Fortnite, like Epic. They could actually say, if you want to buy V-Bucks, go to epic.com or go to fortnite.com or whatever and buy it and it will appear in your account. So they could do that. And that's following the guidelines.
But we know that's not why they've done this. They're trying to get something changed with this, and whether or not, obviously, we'll talk about it when we haven't got to the point where we're actually there's lawsuits involved yet. But
because this is
in like what we're saying. But
this is all about friction, right? Because whatever you want to say, the App Store and the Google Play Store, it makes things very seamless. And seamless to a point where it's crazy, where kids are spending thousands of dollars. Like, it's maybe too seamless. Epic introduced this update, pushed to all platforms. And then in response, and I can't remember how long it was, but it was felt like within hours. Because I remember reading articles saying, Fortnite's pushed this out and it's offering an alternative way to buy in-app purchases. And almost the commentary around it was like, how are they doing this? Isn't this just violating the terms of service? And then the next set of articles that came out were like, Apple has removed Fortnite from the iOS App Store. It's like,
who'd have thunk?
Ooh, okay, so it's at least up there as one of the biggest games in the world, really. Because unfortunately, if you count the iOS devices as gaming devices, Fortnite's probably still up there with like GTA 5 as the biggest game, in Minecraft you'd probably say, the biggest games going around, and to remove it, like, wow, okay, that's pretty full on. And they were pretty brief around their position on it, just sort of saying, hey, this violates the App Store guidelines, and the payment feature has not been reviewed or approved by Apple, and so it's been removed. Now, what it means is you can still play it if you have it on your device, and I believe you can still buy V-Bucks. like through Apple, but yeah, you can't get the new update. Like it's just been removed completely.
Well, I think when you say you can't get the new update, I guess I think this was the latest update, so it's I guess if you hadn't updated your version of Fortnite yet to this version, then you're unable to do that anyway. But it's crazy. Just if this was any other game that obviously not on this scale, this wouldn't have been as much of a story. But the fact that it's one of the biggest games in the world and has been for the last at least 2 years.
Yeah,
it's crazy, and like these are some giant companies, and obviously Apple, and we'll mention Google soon, but Epic is has Tencent has stock in Epic and things like that. It's kind of like these are some big money makers, and it's almost like I don't know. It's like they're just slapping each other in the face, like challenging each other to take the next move. It's kind of crazy to me.
Well, this whole thing was a huge gamble, and Tim Sweeney, to his credit, and I know people will hate me for saying that, he's been pretty aggressive in this space, and willing to put his money where his mouth is and back his theories. So he's taken the Fortnite money, and now really like it's costing him, like Epic, and then also really Apple, a lot of money, removing it from the App Store, because there's people who will get new iPhones, new iPads. Fortnite's very popular. Like you won't be able to install it now, and it's a very calculated move, as we called out from the start, because what happened as soon as they banned it, it's essentially, Epic had created a trap for Apple, and once they banned it, they then filed suit in Californian courts, and very not contrived, that's the wrong way to say it, but there is a lot of thought that's gone into what they're doing here. So they've used a New York law firm. They're not a Californian company, Epic. They're, I think, based in Maryland from memory. So they're there, but they've chosen the Californian courts, which is their right to do in the US. That's how the US system works. You're allowed to raise a lawsuit in whatever state you want. They've chosen California on purpose because they have the most robust antitrust laws in the country. And, like there's a whole host of stuff in this lawsuit. I actually flipped through a lot of it. That is just like really fascinating. So it's 65 pages long. And then at the same time, they released a parody of Apple's very famous Macintosh ad, the 1984 ad, which was challenging IBM, saying, IBM, Big Blue, you've lost your way, you're a monopoly, you need to like be shaken up, and that's what we're doing. So, Tim Sweeney here is trying to create a parallel, like Epic are the ones who are trying to shake things up.
And it looks exactly like the ad.
With Fortnite characters.
With Fortnite characters. And the thing with this is, so I'm just picturing in my head now, I don't know how you submit a lawsuit, especially in the US, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you physically have to hand documents, or can you submit something online? Do you know?
Oh, it depends. So you file a lawsuit, but it depends on the state. So in Australia, like I can speak to that a bit more, you definitely have to do it in person.
Just assuming it's been done in person, what I was getting at was, I can just imagine, right? They've got someone in California. They send them to wherever they need to submit, and they just have them standing in the foyer with the document, and they're just like, okay, we'll wait. We'll keep refreshing whatever they're refreshing. Oh, they've removed us, and then the person just slams the paperwork down on the table. And I just imagine the visual of that is hilarious in my head. How they've kind of lined this all up. And if it was done online, then instead the person's sitting there with like the mouse button over the submit button or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. Like usually the US is almost more backwards than other countries, like more old school, I probably should say, in a fairer way. So I'd imagine a lot of it.
You heard it here. USA is backwards.
a lot of the stuff would be still physical. I mean, even the Australian courts only, when they really got pushed with the whole COVID stuff, moved to being online. And same as the Supreme Court in the US. they don't allow, typically, they didn't allow any audio recording of the Supreme Court in session. The only way you could hear it is you'd have to physically go there to see them and to hear them. And then with the whole COVID situation, they were forced to. And there's some hilarious stuff that happened. There was like one of the justices had obviously gone into the bathroom and not put their mic on, their microphone on mute. Like when they're in session. So it's just really amazing stuff.
That's an
image.
No, that's what's the Leslie Nielsen movies? Naked Gun. That's like a Naked Gun. I think one of them opens up with something similar. But
it is.
I think Epic missed a chance to take a photo of the documents with like written in like handwriting hashtag free Fortnite, which is like the hashtag they're pushing. They should have like taken a photo of on their actual the paperwork submitted to the courthouse. That would have been really funny, or wherever they submit it.
And look, like, you know, I'm not a lawyer, and then, you know, even if you are a lawyer, you have to practice, you know, Californian law, and they've filed it in federal court as well. But, you know, just kind of going through and listening to some legal experts into this case, number one, do I think that Epic are trying to win this lawsuit against Apple? I think that they know they're not going to win it. I think, you know, they probably think it's a 5% chance that they'll win this lawsuit. I think there's an overarching effort that they're trying to do here, which is trying to break up the control that Apple has, and then by extension Google, and we'll get into that soon, on these mobile platforms. Because as opposed to other platforms like PC, where, you know, Epic have gone, okay, we don't like the 30% fee that Steam charges. We'll create our own game, like storefront, and we'll try to make it really big, and we'll make the fee 12%. It's almost impossible. Well, with Apple, it is impossible. You can't even sideload apps properly. Like they just don't work on the device after a period of time. But you go through the lawsuit, and it's like, it's so tenuous, man. Like, even if you understand, like, you don't have to worry about the law so much, just understand the logic of what they're saying. They're trying to say that in-app purchases are basically just transactions, like transaction fees, like PayPal. Now, do you think of in-app purchases as, oh, that's just like a PayPal fee that you're sending to someone?
Oh, that's a tricky question. Because I've never even thought of it. It's just as a position as a gamer, I just think of it as I am making a purchase. I'm not thinking of anything about the transaction itself. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, but do you think of it as you're paying for something, or do you feel like it's just a payment? Does that make sense? Like I'm transferring money to you. Hey?
No, it does not feel like that at all. No.
Yeah. So
it feels like I am making a purchase. So to me, it does feel like a transaction.
Well, okay, so I'll explain it like this, because I'm actually not being clear. So, you know, with eBay, and in the old days, eBay and PayPal were the same company, but they're separate now. So you buy something on eBay and you use normally PayPal to pay for it, right? What they're trying to say is the in-app purchase is only the PayPal component of it. Whereas personally, I don't think of it like that. Like if I'm playing a game and then it has some stuff on it and it says, hey, if you buy this thing, it removes ads, I view it as, oh, okay, that's like the eBay purchase and the PayPal purchase. I'm actually buying something. It's digital, but I'm paying for something. It's not just a payment. It's not like they're facilitating a payment. It's actually I'm buying something, and when I buy something, there's a payment attached to it. Does that make sense?
That's what I said. It feels like I'm making a purchase, a transaction.
Yeah. The lawsuit
for something.
Yeah, whereas the lawsuit is trying to say, no, it's just a payment. You're not getting anything. It's just a payment. That's all they do. And I'm like, geez, this isn't going to hold up. And that's where they're coming from a dollar perspective. They're like, hey, PayPal, they charge like 2.9% and Apple charges 30%. So they're 10 times higher than the market and everything like that. I'm like, this is just, I feel like they have very, very, very little chance, you know, just from a logic perspective of winning this case. And then also just by the fact that they're on, you know, PlayStation Store, you know, Nintendo, and they're also charging 30%. So it's kind of a bit like, why are you attacking Google? It seems, and Apple, it seems a bit weird. But
so we know those other platforms are also 30?
Yeah, like pretty much it's industry standard.
Okay.
And that's also going to be a really hard thing to prove because the whole antitrust slash monopoly perspective, and this is generally a global perspective, is are you doing harm to the consumer? And I only know this because I work in financial services in Australia, and a lot of people argue it's a monopoly, but the argument's always around, are you doing harm to the consumer? So are you being unfair and unreasonable with your actions? And by the way, that's why Epic has actually like sprung this trap, right? Because they're trying to do something, goat, Apple and Google into doing something that they can argue, hey, they're being unfair. Look at them,
Wait,
wielding their power.
Did you just say goat?
I meant goad. Did I say goat?
Goat. They're
So
trying to
goad them into doing that.
No, I just wanted to get an episode title from that. That's all.
And like I want to move on to the Google portion of this. So, they did the same thing with Google. I think it took longer for Google to follow suit and remove Fortnite from Google Play, and it didn't get as much airtime, even though there are more Android phones, and in theory, it actually would impact more people. Now, Epic also sued Google, and the lawsuit is different. I also flicked through that lawsuit. Now, with this lawsuit, I actually think that they have some kind of case in this lawsuit, right? So what they're trying to do is they're trying to say in this lawsuit, and there's some really cool channels on YouTube. We'll link in the description on the clip show, but they're trying to argue that effectively Google is a little bit like Windows in the 90s. When Windows was forcing users to have Internet Explorer? And then there was a big antitrust, and the government won against Microsoft in that case. And whether you agree or not with the case, it has become case law in America. Now, in the case with Epic, it's really interesting. There's some stuff that came out in the lawsuit, which was Epic and Tim Sweeney had a deal with the manufacturer OnePlus. I don't know if you know them. They're a fairly large manufacturer.
Not familiar myself, but feel free to explain.
Yeah, well, they're just like one of the largest Android OEMs. They're pretty popular in Australia, but they're massive in Asia. Now, Epic, they actually did a deal with them where they would actually install Epic on the phones by default. So you didn't have to go to the Google Play Store or anything. You just clicked on Epic, and then you could install Fortnite or whatever Epic games were on there.
Just like iTunes and that U2 album.
Right. But I'm all for that, right? Like if you want to do that, fine. Like I don't want to buy a phone that has Epic on it, but if that's the deal that they want to make, and the thing is, Epic then cuts out Google, so then Epic can make money off all the in-app purchases because they've installed the app directly on the Android device. Now, when Google caught wind of this, they actually went back to OnePlus and said, if you do that, we will terminate your license to have Android as a manufacturer. Now, this is where they're going to get themselves in trouble, I think, Google, because when you're trying to wield your power and you do something like that, and, if you're the judge, you go, well, wait a second, like, what have they done? What has OnePlus done in this case? Like, they're trying to offer a benefit to a customer, and you've removed them from offering that benefit by using your power of, you have the control of the license to be able to issue the license. So, they're potentially going to get themselves into a little strife in this one.
It's just interesting they just didn't copy and paste the lawsuit. It is actually slightly different.
There are.
I would have just assumed it's the same thing myself, but I'm not the one that sat there and actually going through it. So
it's a bit different. There's some stuff that's like they're arguing the same stuff that I don't think is going to fly, which is around, the transaction fees they're just transaction fees in our purchases. So they're trying to set this whole thing up like as if, one set of things is, the app, and then everything else is just payments, not actual transactions, which is just, it doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think anyone will let it fly, but yeah. And then there was also a really interesting one where they wrote some stuff about how Epic and Google were entering negotiations about how can you discount this fee, this 30% fee, right? And then Google was like, if you start using our services, we'll let you have discounts on those things, but not the 30%.
It's this whole thing is just, as you said, this, I think, is going to end up being like almost like a watershed moment. When obviously we don't know how it's all going to go yet, but I think we will see this kind of as the start of something much bigger, and see the ripples, I guess, across all the different platforms for probably for years to come. So
Yeah, and I think that's why I think like this is so critical, and I kind of love this kind of big business stuff. But I look at this and go, you know what? Like we could look back at this, and this will probably take a year or two to actually settle in court. But we might look back and go, oh, actually, this was a huge driver. Because whether this wins or loses, I think it's more the pressure it will put on to, governments and sort of people to look at these markets, and then just the providers themselves to actually just go, you know what, we might need to, address the fees and whether 30% is actually fair or not. Because to me, that does seem exorbitant, especially for the in-app purchases, and very inconsistent because they don't charge these levels of fees for other services. Like if you're buying,
and I think
yeah, go on.
no, sorry, finish.
Yeah, no, I was just saying if you're buying like an Amazon movie, they've done a deal with Amazon where they don't charge 30%. I think they charge 10% or something. So they're pretty inconsistent, to be fair, with how this is adjudicated. It's really just that it makes so much money. It's hard for them to say no to it.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the sentiment towards Epic plays out as well, because we know that Epic Games Store had a ton of negative, I guess, PR and online reputation regarding when they started announcing all the, it's been a while now, but all the exclusives coming to the Epic Games Store. Oh, the anti-consumer and everything. The fact that, we're going to talk about Control a bit later. That was an Epic Games Store exclusive. And I wonder if I've already seen a lot of that sentiment be in Epic's favor, because they're taking it to the big corporates, which is ridiculous because Epic is also a big corporate at this point. But it's going to be interesting to see if that actually ends up playing out in a very positive way for them and almost rebuilds that reputation in, I guess, those circles. Now, I always thought that was ridiculous because it's just a platform, just like Steam is a platform. But there were some legitimate gripes people had with Epic Games Store. But it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out as well, just the perception of Epic.
No, I totally agree. It's going to be, this is one to watch. It's going to play out over a long period of time. Halo Infinite. So Halo Infinite has had a delay. So we saw a post on the official Halo Twitter site from 343 Industries saying, today I want to share an important Halo Infinite development update with the community. We have made the difficult decision to shift our release to 2021 to ensure the team has adequate time to deliver a Halo game experience that meets our vision. And, it goes on a bit further, but wow, like this actually kind of blew my mind when this happened. Like I just didn't think that they would allow this to happen. We didn't kind of mention it, but I had a sense that the game was not going to schedule and it was just going to be a mess at launch, a bit like what happened with MCC, Master Chief Collection, when it first came out.
Yeah, I'm the same. This, of all games to get delayed, I would not have picked it to be Halo Infinite. Not only did they show the game off just a couple of weeks ago and seemed very confident to do so, even though they did say, it's still, in development footage. The fact that, even that recently they were, really kind of positioning this as the big launch title for them to do it. Now, do I think it's a good idea? Yeah. Does it suck for people that were obviously looking forward to getting a Series X and playing it on launch? Yeah, it sucks. But what's the alternative? To have a broken game, a rush game, and people to just crunch and in the middle of pandemic, I guess development. It's horrible, but if it was necessary, then I think just like when Nintendo has to do the same, delaying games, just the more, if you need more time to work on a game, then take the time. It obviously, I could imagine the amount of marketing money and timeline shifts there that would have to happen. It would not have been an easy decision to make.
Yeah, but it's just my gut reaction straight away was like, "Oh my god! Like, is this gonna kill Xbox?" I know that like that's such an overreaction, and I've kind of it settled in my own mind a bit, but it just felt like such a blow. I was like, what are they launching with? Because I think the context that we should say is that when I heard that it was getting delayed, it actually did make me think, are they going to delay their Series X? But in fact, they've actually come out and said it's coming out in November. So yeah, like what? That means that it has no exclusive titles. Is that correct? That's got to be correct,
right? Forza could be an exclusive title. We don't know yet.
Sure.
The thing is, I think this whole trend of there having to be these huge games on launch is only a recent generation trend. Obviously, Super Nintendo, you had Mario World. I'm not going to dispute that wasn't a huge game to launch with, but they only had 4 games in total.
Yeah, but
at least
Mario
in Australia.
World. Yeah, but Mario World, come on.
No, I understand. But when I look at but even Xbox One, it didn't have huge titles like a Halo level title, I should say.
Yeah, but it didn't do well, right?
Yeah, but they didn't do well for other reasons. I don't think it was the software the problem there. It was the fact that people thought you had to be connected to the internet 24/7 to make the thing work.
Bad. Yeah.
So I'm less interested about launch titles, and I know that's just how I feel, and it is important. I'm not saying it's not. I think they just, and hindsight's 2020 on this, but they shouldn't have probably ever pushed it to be a launch title if there wasn't any confidence in it. But they wouldn't have known, I guess. And if that was the case, then I don't think anyone would be saying anything about the launch because we'd be in the same position. I don't think people would be like, well, what big game is there? Because we don't even know the launch date yet. And they're going to start announcing some of that stuff a bit more. But it is a huge blow, no doubt about it. I just think that given the fact that our game libraries, especially as we all get older as well, and have more, I say disposable income. Obviously, people are going through very tough times at the moment. But as you said last week, people are buying games even in this time, and we've all got so many games to play. I think with Series X, there's going to be games to play on it. You just can't play Halo, which sucks, but they need more time. So I think we just have to, just grin and bear it, unfortunately.
And like, I kind of wonder, like, the logic, of just being in the business meeting room, chatting about it. What do we do? Do we push it back? Do we push it out, kind of knowing that it's going to be a bit of a mess, and fix it and kind of cop the PR flack and go, okay, hey guys, we recognize that this isn't quite what we thought it was going to be. This is what we're doing. This is the plan. Because kind of not having it at all, it's going to be hit either way, right? Like, this is not a net positive. You can't ever argue this is a net positive. So it's either you launch and it's bad, and does that really just bomb the Series X launch? Or do you not have it and then people, because there is a scenario where in December people go, well, wait a second. Because, you got to think about the retail context as well. People go, oh, so I'm going to buy the Series X. What games does it have on it? Or nothing. Like, literally, like, that we know of. Like, no, and it doesn't feel like there's going to be a big name. Whereas my understanding is that Spider-Man Miles Morales is going to be available for the PS5 on launch. And that, like, Spider-Man's a big game, dude.
But we don't know yet, and that's why I mentioned Forza, because as much as we may not be interested in it, that is a big name for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Is it enough to save a launch from being a bit of a bit lackluster? Maybe not, but that's why I mentioned the previous generations. Not every generation has always had the killer app on launch. A lot of the killer apps tend to come within the first 6 months, basically. Like, that's when I think you start picking up people that aren't those launch day buyers. And in terms of not being net positive, 100% from a launch standpoint, but when we're talking about the game itself, because this, ultimately, to me, the more interesting story here is about Halo Infinite, not the actual launch, which is probably the opposite of maybe what you're thinking. It's better for the game because the alternative is obviously also, and we're going to mention what Phil Spencer kind of said about it as well, but if they'd split it up and launched it, for instance, with multiplayer, because that probably would have made the most sense if you're going to do it that way.
Well, yeah. Well, let's
that would have been the
move in.
alternative.
Let's move into the next segment. So, a really weird thing happened during the week that Phil Spencer actually appeared on this very, I'll give it clever talk show, which uses Animal Crossing as a set. So, people dial in. From a COVID perspective, everyone's dialing into these sessions anyway. So the whole backdrop is Animal Crossing. And yeah, he decided he wanted to appear on this talk show, Animal Talking. And yeah, as you pointed out, he actually discussed whether they should split it up. So I didn't actually hear the discussion. Was it like split up the multiplayer? Is that what it was coming from?
Yeah, look, that's my takeaway from it. Similar to, Call of Duty has played around with this idea before. I mean, it's common these days, but it gets a lot of backlash. Street Fighter 5 as well released. Only started, I guess, very bare bones and adding to it. And to me, like that, it would have, if you're gonna ever do that, it would have made sense to launch with the multiplayer component and then do the campaign after that, because essentially I think if you launch with the campaign first, I think more people would miss the multiplayer than miss the campaign in regards to like overall in that sense.
Yeah.
If I'm making sense myself.
Yeah.
But he said that no, they decided against it, and I can kind of understand, because then it's almost like, well, this is a lesser Halo experience than the previous games, and this is meant to be like this is meant to be the best Halo ever. Every new Halo should be positioned as the best Halo ever, and especially one that's kind of like launching with a new console, or was launching for new console. So, but just the whole fact that Phil Spencer was on an Animal Crossing talk show is just absolutely bizarre to me, and it's just like, that's like a little microcosm of where everything's at in the industry. Just Phil Spencer's always been really open and talking about how much he loves Nintendo and things like that.
Yeah.
And obviously, Nintendo and Microsoft have worked quite closely in recent years as well, which is huge. But just the fact that you've got the head of Xbox on an Animal Crossing talk show, obviously not sponsored by Nintendo or backed by Nintendo, but it's still just really weird to me. I just love it.
Yeah, but still on a exclusive, right? On Nintendo, like Animal Crossing, it's synonymous with Nintendo.
Yeah.
It's the only place you can play it ever. So, look, it's one of those ones with how bizarre this year has been. This is like a top 10 weird things of 2018 if it happened then. Whereas like this year it's like oh yeah, so the guy who runs Xbox, he appeared in the Animal Crossing talk show. Like, it's weird.
He also shared the virtual couch with Lisa Loeb, and I'm like, I'd forgotten all about Lisa Loeb. Do you remember Lisa Loeb?
No, I've forgotten about it totally. I do recognize the name. Who's Lisa Loeb again?
Lisa Loeb, she's a musician. So I swear she was like late 90s or early 2000s. But yeah, I was just like, wow, what a random two guests to have on this talk show at the same time.
Yeah, I do know. Yeah, Stay. That's so weird. That's so odd. Like, that's a weird like booking. Like, why would you just have Phil Spencer on as a special, right? Like, anyway. But yeah,
look, maybe she's a regular guest. We don't know, mate. But anyway, it's just a weird little story. But obviously, he did kind of discuss Halo a bit, and I don't know if I think that may have been potentially his first public comments about after they announced the leak, like a couple of days earlier. But yeah,
no, it was because I did see that news, and I thought, what, like Phil Spencer's commenting this through Animal Crossing? I was like, what am I reading? Like, this is weird. But so I'm not sure if I took away what your view was. Do you think that they should have launched with a multiplayer only version, kind of going, hey, sorry, we wanted to give you some kind of Halo experience. It's not ideal, but better than having nothing? Or do you think you agree with where they came from and delayed the whole thing?
I agree with delaying the whole thing. I just think it'll overall end up being a better game for it. And We saw it with Cyberpunk this year. We saw it with a whole bunch of other games, including Avengers got pushed back multiple times. We're about to talk about another game that's not on that scale, but that's also been pushed back. Games need to be delayed sometimes.
Yeah.
And as much as people complain about it, a lot of those people that complain probably wouldn't have even bought it when it first launched. They probably would have waited months for it to go cheap. They just like complaining about things. But it sucks for people that are obviously super excited and had pre-orders and everything. I'm not going to say that it doesn't suck.
So, like, I mean, the final thing I just wanted to say about this delay before we get on to another delay is just, I actually wish they did release the multiplayer version only. And you know how I would have done it? It would have been like, look, we could have done it either way. We could have released the multiplayer or like pushed it back. But what we want to do is release the multiplayer, make that digital only. So, you know, not have the physical stuff out in the stores, because we want to make sure that when you get that physical version, it's got the campaign and the multiplayer on it, and it is free to play. And we're going to go even further. We're going to say it's free to play. You don't even need Xbox Live. Like, you know, because you currently do need Xbox Live to play it for free with the multiplayer when they release that. Like, we're going to remove that as well, just as a sort of a gesture to say, you know what, you know, obviously this is not ideal, but we want to give you some Halo experience over the holiday. We know it's been a tough year, right? Like, I don't see a loss there for me personally.
I wonder if, because obviously they're working on the multiplayer, you know, now as well as the campaign, but I wonder if there's a whole bunch of multiplayer maps that are based in the story locations as well. And that's a small thing, but that has happened in previous games. Now, sometimes they'll be completely random maps. But it's more even like, I think visually they will obviously reuse textures and the general locations, and I guess the you know, what's the sky map or whatever they call it, you know, like the backgrounds and things. And you're like, wait, why are we looking at this location? Why can we see this? You know, and that's an easy thing to work around because they can just probably just reskin stuff if they want to do that. But yeah, it's interesting. I think the fact that, and you just mentioned it, I've completely forgotten that the multiplayer is free to play. That throws a big spanner in the works of how you think about this in some ways, because you want to make sure that people buy this game that aren't on Game Pass, and suddenly the fact that, you know, they've launched the multiplayer first, people are like, well, the only place we can get it is free to play, and that's all I ever care about. You maybe you'll lose some sales there, but it's interesting, and I think that we will kind of probably almost forget that it was originally meant to be a launch title in, you know, 5 years. It'll just be, oh, Halo came out. I reckon it'll probably end up coming out probably in Feb, around that timeline, which is not that long after when you think about it.
Yeah, because we didn't talk about that. I reckon it'd be longer. I think it's more like a March, April game. Just because, you know, why would you delay it only 2 months? Normally these things get delayed a little bit more than that.
We'll see. We'll see what they end up moving it to.
Yeah, fair enough.
And in other delay news, we also have Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 also delayed to 2021. So this was actually announced the day before Halo. And while obviously this is not going to get the level of news, I think they would have also been happy to be like, oh, Halo got delayed? Sweet, no one's going to even talk about us at all. So this sequel is been in development for quite a while and is the sequel to 2004's cult classic RPG, which is based on the Vampire Masquerade's tabletop series, which I'm not in tabletop gaming, but has a whole massive world around it. There's a whole bunch of not only previous video games, but there's also games being in development that are not this game at the same time, like visual novels. And there's also, as part of the same world of Vampire the Masquerades, there's like a wider world as well, and there's different games coming out. I forget the names of it, but it's like in the werewolf line. So there's so many different like things happening with this one property, but this was the game that people really wanted, and essentially they've had to delay. I think it's been developed by a company called Hardsuit Labs and published by Paradox, and they essentially just said, you know, a basic statement, what you'd expect, that they just need more time. So I think this really sucks because it's, you know, 2004. You know, it's been a long time, and I think people thought that they'd never see another game in this series, at least in this style. And Oh, well, again, with Halo, I think, especially in a smaller developer like this, the last thing you want is people to rush it out, especially when it's been anticipated for so long. So,
Yeah.
guess I don't think this is going to be the last game we hear of delays, just with everything going on with the pandemic. So,
No, and that's the thing. Like, just given this year, it's games that are launching with the title. Launch titles always are like some of the craziest crunch periods because they're still not super familiar with the hardware, and there's a fixed date that you got to hit. And it's like, if you're a launch title, historically you always hit that date. And just given the world that we're in, the issues that we're having, and like working from home, so like a lot of different conditions for people, yeah, you just wonder how many games are going to get delayed. And a game like Cyberpunk 2077, I kind of wonder in the future if people will look at that and go, oh, that's like a launch title for the PS5 and the Xbox One, right? But sorry, Series X, I should say. But it's not. Like, that's the weird thing about it to me, that they're not releasing it as a launch title. Like, they're releasing it on the PS4 and the Xbox One, and it's on the, like, I didn't check this beforehand, but my prediction is that the new consoles will get released on the 20th of November, which is a week before Black Friday, and Cyberpunk 2077 is coming out on the 19th of November. So it's going to be like crazy if it actually does eventuate like that, where you have, one of the biggest games of the year, if not the biggest. It's up there with Last of Us Part 2 and probably Animal Crossing. But from an anticipation point, I think across all platforms, Cyberpunk to me is the number one for this year. And you've got like that game coming out and then the next gen, but then that game is really not built for the next gen and it's not getting released on the next gen until 2021. It's just so odd, right?
I was about to say, I didn't know if they'd given a date or around their, I guess, next gen upgrade, but if they've said 2021, then
yeah. So they've confirmed that. So, because what I was expecting them to do, you know how they delayed it, I was being a bit cynical. And to be fair, CD Projekt Red are very consumer friendly, almost like too much from a very business headed person like me. But, they're very fair to consumers, to be fair to them. And I kind of was being cynical and thinking, well, they're delaying the game and it's kind of like so close to next gen. Why don't you launch it on next gen along with like the previous gen and make a stack of money? Because it's like the number one title you'd get on next gen if it was available there.
But I don't think that that they wouldn't make that date. They wouldn't. I don't know when they obviously made the decision to start, a development pathway for these upgraded versions on the next gens. But I don't think they, given they've already had to delay the release multiple times now. It was meant to come out, I can't remember, it was like March or whatever, then got delayed again. I don't think they would have been able to hit the launch if they'd done that.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, and it would have been a bit contrived because they would have really need to, target and focus on that. And maybe that would make the current version suffer even more and then get a lot of backlash. But speaking about next gen, so further next gen news. So the Dualsense has been leaked from a perspective around the controller. So they've actually got this got leaked on Twitter. It appears that someone who works on controller accessories, so accessories for the console, this has always been known that they do get the physical consoles and the controllers, and they can't really use them, but they use the actual physical devices to test the accessories and the molds and the prototypes to make sure that they fit and everything's like working well. And it seems like this person, and like I think, for you and I, we're always on the same page as this. This is wrong to do this. If you're in a position like this and you have access to this stuff, you should not share it. You are breaching, number one, your employer, but it's also doing the wrong thing from my perspective. But it is out there in the public. But yeah, the new piece of information here is that the actual capacity for the Dualsense battery is now known, if this is correct. Yeah, go on.
So integot. Can I ask, what is the Dualsense? Because I don't think we've clarified that the Dualsense is the new PlayStation 5 controller.
Yes. Well,
where's he going to mention the word PlayStation 5? I'm sure that most people listening are going to know what they'll... And they're probably, if they're watching on YouTube, they're going to see a picture of it. They know exactly what it looks like. But I don't... when you say that, like, I know, but when I think of DualSense, like, I'm like, oh, that's right, that's what the PlayStation 5 controller is called. Like, the fact that Sony always named their controllers is really funny to me, because I'm just like, it's the PlayStation controller, it's the Xbox One controller.
That's so funny.
To me, it's just the controller of the console, like, to name it. The only thing that made sense to me was the Wii Mote, because they also had, the different, they had the, like, nunchuck and stuff. So they kind of had to name things there so people knew what they were talking about. Anyway, I just wanted to just, like, give you crap.
No. It's a good point. It's a good point to clarify. And there's a couple of things there. Number one, the whole Wiimote thing, it made me laugh because Nintendo always instructed everyone that they worked with, never, ever, ever call it Wiimote. It's Wii Remote. Which just made me laugh because no one called it Wii Remote outside of when they had to. And whenever they'd refer to it, they'd always say Wiimote. And yeah, it's just funny.
Sorry, on that note, can I just mention, right, this is completely off topic, but I think it's a good chance to. I'm fairly certain the first time I ever heard about the Wii name was actually, like, in, like, the living room at, like, one of your old house or something. And I'm like, I think we were talking, like, I think that's when I found out about it. I just happened to be, like, hanging around with you at the time, because, like, that when I think about when I heard about it, I just remember sitting there at, like, the dining room table just being like, what are they smoking? Like, what the hell? And to their credit, like, as much as I'm not a fan of that era of Nintendo, the name was not the problem. The name was fine. So I just thought that was just really interesting.
So I'm always obsessed about names, and that name is one of the names I always go to where it's like, the name doesn't matter. Like, the name really doesn't matter. As long as it's not, like, impossible to say. Like, and I always try to remember this, but what is it? Like, supersonic, acrobatic, hyper-powered rocket cars or whatever.
Battle cars.
Yeah. And it's like, that's
that game no one remembers.
Exactly. And then the spiritual sequel to that, Rocket League. Okay, that's a good name. But you don't need to have a good name. You just need to not have the supersonic blah, blah, blah name.
And that's the thing, is like, because when you said name doesn't matter, I think what you said there nails it. It only matters if you've got a bad name, like the Wii U.
Or like a cheese brand in Australia that is going to change its name finally, which I'm not even going to mention. Like, that's how bad the name is, right? So yeah, if you've got a bad name, Washington Redskins, NFL team, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. Change your name. Just move on, change your name. Call yourself Washington Football Club. That's fine. Move on. And it does, just kind of going back to the DualSense, which is PlayStation 5's next-gen controller. PlayStation 5's next-gen controller. It is funny because, like, we're not, like, console war people. I don't think we care. We'd probably get every console if we had the money. It is funny how, like, from a PlayStation perspective, everyone always says DualShock 2, DualShock 3, DualShock 4. Like, that's part of PlayStation. So to not go DualShock 5, which people were already saying, it is funny now to just go DualSense.
What was the PlayStation 3 one? Something...
6-axis.
It was called 6-axis, that's
See,
right.
it's like
no one remembers thing.
That was horrible, man. That was so bad.
It was Lair, wasn't it? That was Factor 5's. The game that put Factor 5 in the grave, which is... they were such a good developer. Man, I miss them.
Well, there was a story behind that because they were actually in a lawsuit, I believe, Sony, over, I think it was a vibration or something like that. And there was a whole bunch of stuff that they needed to take out of that 6-axis controller. It's horrible. It feels horrible. It's really light. I've got one, actually. I really don't like it. I don't know if I have a DualShock 3.
What was the PlayStation that originally had the boomerang controller? Was that PS2?
PS3.
PS3.
So that was a
PS3.
prototype PS3 one, yeah.
So wait, so PS3 also had the boomerang and the 6-axis?
So it was meant to have the boomerang, and then everyone was like, wow, that looks horrible. And it does.
Yeah, I know. And then they got the 6-axis instead. So it was PS3 that had both of those. Wow.
Yeah, but the 6-axis, in fairness to them, like, I think from memory, and I might be wrong, but from memory, they were in a lawsuit. And they were trying to, basically get something around the Wii, right? So more like gyro stuff. So that's where that 6-axis crap came in, and it was horrible. And then later they released a DualShock 3, which everyone loves.
My point is that that's just a real unfortunate, like, different. Basically, for one console to have that many, I guess, like, you know what I mean. It's
Well,
to basically be like, oh, we can't figure out exactly all that. We've got things influencing, rather than, oh, well, this is a new controller and that's what it is. And I say that, a lot of the stuff Nintendo's shown off, like the original DS, Nintendo DS, like, it looks so different to what it ended up being. So it's, they're not the only, obviously, company that has showcased something and then decided, no, actually, that doesn't work.
And like, it is something funny about Sony though, because they do revise the core controller more often than you think. So with the first PlayStation, PS1, which we'll talk about later in the show, not too far away, they went from, no analog, and, so it was almost like a Super Nintendo controller, to be honest, to then adding in analog and then like rumble as well. Like that's when the DualShock 1 came out. And that was like the core controller. Like, whereas most other console manufacturers, I'm just trying to think actually, like you never see Nintendo iterate the controller live in the lifespan, really. Like you kind of have the offshoots, like, the dog bone NES controller. Do you remember that? So stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll see slight revisions. Like, for instance, the Xbox One controllers at launch are actually slightly different than what they are.
Oh, really?
These days. Yeah, so
What's different? I didn't know that.
Just the bumpers work quite differently. Like the original bumpers on Xbox One controller were really bad, and
really?
you got to the point where you'd have to, like, after a while, you'd have to click at the top at like the apex of the button to get it to actually work. And what was really frustrating was the first game I bought for Xbox One, which is why I bought the console, was Dark Souls 2, Scholar of First Sin. And anyone who's played Dark Souls knows that you're pressing the right bumper a lot because that's your primary normal attack button. Every attack you do is the right bumper. And after a while, it just got so excruciating that that was a horrible thing. They fixed that, and I think they've gone through a couple of D-pad changes here and there, but but they didn't change, like, if a general consumer is looking at one and looking at the other, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference, or like they'd have to know about some of these changes. Unlike the DualShock, the PlayStation to DualShock was wow, and then they launched one. There was Ape Escape was a huge thing that used the dual analogs and things.
Yeah, correct.
So
no, I didn't realize that they've had so many revisions, and it's also like, added back in the 3.5mm jack, and they didn't have Bluetooth in the earlier ones.
Exactly.
On Xbox.
That's the other one. Yeah, Bluetooth was the one I was trying to think of, because they obviously, now you don't need any kind of adapter or anything to just use it on PC. You just, as long as you've got Bluetooth, I should say. So.
Yeah, no, that kind of blew me away, actually. I didn't know all this stuff about the Xbox controller. It, like, and I'm not an Xbox user, but I'd look at the Xbox One controller, especially, the Elite 2, and I'd probably look at it and go, it's probably the best controller that's ever been made. It just looks like, everything about it looks very refined. So I'm actually interested in using it eventually, when I pick up an Xbox at some stage, maybe.
I'm keen to see what the new one, the Series X ones, are like, because I think they've found a good formula for it, and it's kind of almost like, I'd say, the DualShock to DualShock 2 to DualShock 3. There's obviously differences, but the core model is very similar. Obviously, DualSense is so different. DualSense is very different. So you got to give it to Sony for actually doing something a bit different for once, as much as some people don't like it.
Yeah, which is different to what they normally do, and probably just rounding out the update around the DualSense. So the reason why the whole battery capacity is so important is, for me, the biggest problem with the DualShock 4 is the lifespan of it, and the capacity of it's horrible compared to something like my Switch Pro controller, which, I kind of forget that I need to charge it, and then I'm like, oh, okay, it's running low, I'll go charge it. The DualShock is a third of the time, so I think it's like 10 to 14 hours. So you pretty much need to put it on the charge all the time. if you're playing regularly. So, you know, a 50% bump up compared to what the DualShock 4 is from a battery. And then also, you know, as innovations go and connectivity and chips get better and more efficient, more energy efficient, you know, I'm guessing that it's probably going to be, you know, more of a 20-hour or 20-hour, maybe even higher battery lifespan on the controller, the DualSense. So I think that that's pretty reasonable. And, you know, that will probably work for most people, and that's a nice bump up. And, you know, sticking to controllers. So we're going to talk about the Xbox Series X or Series S or white controller that seems to be leaked.
Yeah, apparently they got it off some retail site. And I'm like, how the hell do they even have that already?
No. So they got it off. We don't have it in Australia, but it's the equivalent for us of like Gumtree. It's like a local selling thing. Like it's a third party, like secondary market. So yeah, but it's true. Yeah, they picked it up for like $40 or something. It'd been listed.
So yeah, basically this packaging had a whole bunch of, obviously, you know, controllers will show what things are compatible with, and it said Xbox Series X, and it also said Xbox Series S, which kind of, you know, assuming that, you know, and there was a video with this and lots of photos, so if it's someone, you know, pulling a dodgy, they've done a very good job of it. It pretty much confirms the worst kept secret currently, I'd say, the industry, which is Xbox Project Lockhart, which is basically a lower tier SKU of the Xbox Series X, kind of like what the Xbox One S is at the moment. And oh my god, I hate this naming so much. Microsoft, keep killing me.
It's so horrible. And okay, so you know, I just mentioned how we don't normally fall into like a console war thing, but I thought that this was fake, personally. Whereas I don't know why. I just feel like the DualSense isn't. But this one looked fake to me. It just looked like exactly like the Xbox One controller with the minor modifications they need.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, when they turn it around and everything, you see it's actually quite different. So, like in the shape, there's like the top of it especially, and where the charge cable goes in and everything like that. I don't think it is, simply because I was expecting Microsoft to start selling this ahead of time for PC.
Oh, okay.
So that my expectation was they didn't. They haven't announced that, but I don't think so. I was expecting them to put this out as, hey, this is, you know, just like they sell the current Xbox One controllers for PC to basically be, you know, hey, you can buy this now so you can start playing these games on PC. That was kind of my expectation, but maybe they were waiting for launch. So
okay, interesting. Yeah, no, it seemed sus to me, something about it. And also the packaging looked a bit off to me. It just didn't look, I don't know, it just didn't look quite right. It looked like a Photoshop to me. Like it looked, so to be clear, I'll just say one thing to be clear. I think that this is physical, like there's a real physical thing that they've done, but to me it looks like a counterfeit. Like, so I don't know, it just didn't ring true to me for some reason.
So you reckon that the person taking the video thinks it's real?
Not sure.
Do you reckon?
Not sure.
Because why would you go to the trouble for one of the most boring things to try to leak? You know, this isn't new Smash Brothers character. This is really boring. Like Xbox One S. Okay, we all kind of knew it was probably going to be named something like that, just based off what Microsoft is doing with their stupid naming at the moment. But
I feel like, can I just say, I don't know, there should be a rule or something like that, but I think you trying to apply logic to the internet, and it's unreasonable that they would try to do something like so twisted, or, you know, like why would they? Yes, they would.
No, people, but for such a boring thing though, like,
yes,
people do it for more interesting stuff.
100%,
you know,
man.
They tried it, like we talked about before, that people putting listings up, you know, and they end up being fake listings for the price of the PlayStation 5. Like, that's a big thing. This is boring, you know. Like, we all know it's happening. Why would you bother putting a fake controller together with it?
Because people talk about it. We're talking about it in Australia, right? Like, people are weird. People are odd. And it's odd time. I don't know. Look, there's a gut feel that I have on this one, and I'm probably wrong. Right? I'll put my hand up in advance. Probably, okay, I'm probably going to be wrong about this.
And I'll also put my hand up that I don't know. Like I literally don't know if it's real or not. I'd taken this as being like 90% real though.
Yeah. And to be fair, like this one was actually more reported than even the DualSense, which is the PlayStation 5's next-gen controller.
Thank you for clarifying.
Just making sure it's really clear. So, 2 controller leaks, potentially. I think the DualSense one's real. I'm dubious about this one. I do like the screen where it actually goes not assigned controller, but it's almost like too elaborate. It's like this guy is like thought, oh, I'll put this up, and then it like people will have to believe it if it says not assigned. I feel like it wouldn't be not assigned. I don't know. I'm getting too controlling, too controlling about this controller. And should we talk about more about control?
Thank you for that. I'm like, please do the segue. Please do the segue. Thank you.
I'm not that dumb. So control. How nice is this, Remedy? They're giving a free next gen update. How amazing! If you've bought the Control Ultimate Edition. So this Control Ultimate Edition, it's coming out on Steam on August 17, and it's the first time it will be available on Steam. It includes all of the DLC. That's correct.
I believe so.
Yeah. And then it's also available on Epic Games Store, Xbox One, PS4. This is actually like, I'm interested in picking up this Ultimate Edition. I'm going to keep my eyes on it. But the story here is...
Didn't you mention something like this? Like, if they had a version for the DLC, like, I'd pick
literally.
it up. I think when we talked about
Control, No, that's what I said last week. Or the week
then they announced
prior.
This.
I know. Well, this is... look, the thing is, I'm very frugal. Well, like, my wife says I'm cheap. But I'm very frugal. I'm patient. It's not great for the podcast, right? But I'm very patient. And this game is like really high up on my list for I'll skip my backlog and play this game. But I just wanted to wait until they have the Ultimate Edition, which they do now. Normally they call it Game of the Year Edition. That's what I'm very interested in waiting for. But yeah, the story here is that you can only get the next gen update for PS5 and Xbox Series X/S if you have the Ultimate Edition. And yeah, they're getting a hell of a lot of backlash for this. And I don't believe that they've changed their position as the time of recording, which I'm anticipating they will change the position on this because they're going to get so much backlash over this. What are your thoughts on this one?
I'm just distracted by the most trivial thing ever. So, just a bit of inner workings about this podcast. We've got a run sheet where we have the stuff, and I just realised that like I bolded an entire heading of this like topic, and I didn't bold the last letter, and it's just really frustrating.
Oh yeah, I noticed that too.
The word edition, that
kind of stuff.
The N isn't bolded. I need to fix it. All right. Done. Okay, I can talk again. Whew. All right. Crisis averted. So I'm in two minds with this, right? First of all, I hate when people feel super entitled to things that were never part of their original purchase, right? When you purchased this game, there was never any indication that, hey, you're going to somehow get an upgrade path for the new consoles. They wouldn't have known, obviously, that was going to be a thing themselves anyway, right? Remedy. But it's the other half of me is, yeah, it's completely sucks that they're only offering it to people that buy the Ultimate Edition. The thing for me is that, okay, the Ultimate Edition, I love those releases because, yeah, the same as you, I like, sometimes I'll just wait for a game and be like, oh, okay, I'm going to get the whole thing with the DLCs. Like, that's why I haven't played Borderlands 3 yet, because they generally release about 4 or 5 DLCs for them, and every other game I've always bought them and played it all in one go. And so it sucks that they're only offering it there, but I hate the fact that people are basically saying, no, we're owed this.
Yeah, I hate that as well.
No, you're not owed it, right? What, to me, it still wouldn't have obviously appeased everyone, far from it, but there's a season pass for Control, right? Which is basically, when you think about it, the same as the Ultimate Edition in many ways. It's the game plus the DLCs. To me, a good middle line would have been, well, if you've also had the season pass, which is essentially the equivalent of owning this game already, Ultimate Edition, then you'll also get it. To me, that would have been a kind of a good middle line. It wouldn't have obviously stopped people being pissed off. But this whole free you're getting a free upgrade on next gen is only a thing now. It's never been a thing before, with the exception of a couple of situations like Assassin's Creed Black Flag, where Ubisoft basically said, "Okay, we'll discount or we'll give you the new one." It's not an expected thing in the past, but
it
really
is a thing in the past. It is a thing that they have to tackle each time. They do it differently, and they get themselves into trouble.
No, the way it's always worked in the past is when they re-release on a new console, you buy it again. That's the way it's always worked.
No, but the last console, the last generation, they did offer upgrades, and sometimes it was like pay $6.
It was very minimal though. Like
sure.
The general rule was, okay, we're re-releasing like Dishonored Definitive Edition. It was always definitive editions on the new consoles. You never got those for free, and there was
I agree.
And there were very few that offered it at a discounted rate. I think generally the way it worked was people that had it on Steam often got the upgrade because it was very minimal, because they were almost already running the definitive editions. Like Skyrim is an example, right? When they re-released Skyrim on current gen, they either sold it the upgrade. I can't remember if it was free or if it was like a very small upgrade, but basically PC was different, right?
But there was a lot of people getting annoyed about that as well on Steam as well, by the way. But
so the thing with this, right, is that what I also completely understand is things have changed, and you can kind of almost point at Microsoft for this, because they've almost made it like a given with all their games and everything and the whole smart delivery. And now we're at the point where consumers, or gamers, I should say, expect it. And this is one of the first few games to kind of buck that trend and make it, obviously they're still giving it to you free, but you just not for the standard version of the game. But it just, it does irk me that people are acting like this is something that they are, that they're entitled to, basically.
Well, and can I ask a really dumb question? Because, I'm more of a physical gamer, right? So I've bought Control on the Xbox One. I'll be able to plug that into the Series X, like the disc, and play it. Yeah? All good.
Well,
because it's backwards compatible. So it won't look at it won't have the next gen upgrade. It won't have super sexy graphics, all that kind of stuff. But I'll be able to play it.
I don't think they've 100% confirmed it's every single game yet. So what I would say is that is likely the case, but you'd probably have to wait for them to officially release a list of games that are actually confirmed for it. So I don't think they haven't, other than the games I've already said. Every other game, it's almost like you have to kind of put an asterisk for now until they actually confirm that it is actually going to be backwards compatible. But it's pretty much all their messaging has been that way. But yeah, I would be hesitant to assume that is the case.
Because then how would it work if I've bought it digitally? If I bought Control digitally on the Xbox One, can I just, does it pop up on the Series X if it's compatible?
Yeah, so that's the way it works at the moment with 360 games and that. And you're able to filter if you want to basically say show only Xbox One games or 360 games.
Okay.
But it's also very different at the moment because you have to, that's for digital, but for physical, it's very different in the sense that you have to put the game in and then it just downloads it. But that game, now they've built the systems around it, whereas with the Xbox One, it was kind of they had to work that into an ecosystem that wasn't built for it. So
yeah, and they to be fair to Microsoft, they did a great job with that stuff. And basically, as a more of a PC Switch or non-Xbox gamer is the easier way to say what I was about to say. As a non-Xbox gamer, I look at it with envy and go, it feels like everything just works, and probably doesn't, but for me, it's like a magical place where they're getting Xbox games to work on the Xbox One, which is wow, that's just insane. You look I land exactly the same as you on this. If you've bought the DLC for Control, so you've bought it and launched, bought DLC for it, put fair good investment into it, and a game that didn't sell that well, and then they've gone and said no, you needed to have bought the Game of the Year edition, and you've bought all this DLC, but that won't count. I think that's actually a mistake on their part, to do that. And they could definitely, like honor the DLC. Like if you've got the DLC on your system, you will get the ticket that says you can get the next gen upgrade. I think I just think that's wrong, like what they've done. And to me, from a business perspective, I just think it's dumb as well because it's such an obvious thing that seems unfair. But for me, go on.
Sorry to cut you off. I was going to say, just think about the technical part of this as well. Is that people bought normal control, and let's say they haven't bought the DLC. If they're expecting the free upgrade, that free upgrade, the version on the next gen console, is going to be packaged together with the DLC. Then they'd have to figure out, does the person have the DLC 1? Do they have the DLC 2? And then figure out when they do that, does it apply that they also get the DLC 1, DLC 2? No, it's one package because it's the Ultimate Edition that's going to be on the next gen console. So there's a whole bunch of like working around that have to do to even make that the case. So exactly what you just said, if the people have the DLCs, and that's why I said the season pass, it's easiest because then you know that they're going to have access to everything. Then that applies, but otherwise it shouldn't apply, in my opinion.
Yeah. Look, I get what you're saying. Again, we've spoken about this a lot. I feel like timing is really important, and I know they want to get the game out, but it's sort of like, why drive the timing when, you're releasing this update in September? Almost don't even mention the next gen upgrade because, it's only a couple of months till next gen anyway.
Yeah, I guess they want to sell copies of this, so that's why they mention it. They want, there's the weird thing is, there's people that may just purchase this again that haven't bought any DLCs because it probably even makes financial sense to do it, considering they're going to get the free upgrade. So,
yeah. Well, this is a very small game, and I think we've got a very big game.
Yes. So, The Last of Us Part 2, that small title, that no one talked about at all for the last couple of months. Didn't get all of its, storyline leaked or anything, and that Swinny has definitely played a lot of it, considering he's, a big PlayStation owner. Last of Us Part 2 is seeing a pretty substantial update that actually should have gone live a couple of days ago. And this, as we kind of alluded to, up front, I haven't played this game, and integot, you haven't played it either. But
No.
What this update introduces is quite a lot to it. So it adds a new grounded difficulty, which was in the previous Last of Us. So they've reintroduced that, which is basically not quite a survival mode akin to the Fallout games, but is very much, very much the hardest difficulty, but, a lot more scarce resources and things. So it's for people that are obviously looking for more of a challenge. But to me, the more interesting one is they've also added a new Permadeath mode. And that can be enabled in any difficulty. So there's obviously going to be some crazy people out there that combine these two. And if they do combine the both of them, then they'll actually get 2 new trophies they're introducing for beating the game with Permadeath and beating the game on this new difficulty. But
do you mean
aside from
trophies
these,
or... Yeah, trophies. Okay, yeah. Go on, yeah.
What did I say? Did I say trophies?
No, trophies. I was thinking of platinums, but no, I'm getting myself confused.
So what's really cool is they're also adding a whole bunch of modifiers to the game. And I'm not, there's lists out there, but basically, they have new graphics filters that you can switch on and off, audio filters and gameplay modifiers. And there's quite a bit there. It almost reminds me of the cheat codes you can enable in Turok 2 to make like big head mode and, wireframe mode and stuff. So it's really
they're
cool.
Making a comeback in games. Have you noticed that?
Oh, yeah.
And Crash 4 is going to have it as well.
Well, a lot of it's also games that have photo modes, like Ghost of Tsushima had a lot of. Generally, it's always within the game, the photo mode itself, but then you can apply lots of filters and things there as well. But generally, that's not gameplay. So this is, gameplay stuff. So I just thought it's really cool. Obviously, this game is going to be supported for a while, but it's great that it's pretty soon after release that they got this pretty decent update. So.
And just to, bring people in behind the veiled curtain of big week in gaming, I was debating whether we should even talk about this, but definitely wanted to talk about the Hori Split Pad Pro. New colors coming on board, but no, I'm glad we have, because
let's not talk about the second biggest game of the year, because Animal Crossing is the biggest game. But let's talk about the Hori Split Pad Pro.
It's definitely the biggest PlayStation game, but it's actually, even when you were talking about the filter modes, I almost am certain that they do this because of streamers. Like and video creators, content creators, because then you can create interesting looks at the game. And do you reckon that that's the case? Because why do they have this otherwise? It just seems odd.
That makes sense. It's, I mean, there's like Ghost of Tsushima itself, different developer, of course, but that had like a Kurosawa mode where the game was like, I don't know if it was silent. It would make sense if it was silent, but it was like black and white, like, Kurosawa films and stuff. So it's just nice. It's nice they added it in, and I do hope one day to play through these games. They're big gaps in my gaming history, so I'm looking forward to it eventually.
Well, I don't know about Ghost of Tsushima because it just, does it add much to that whole genre? But I do think you'll definitely play Last of Us Part 2. Like that seems to be one of those kind of, you got to play these kind of games before you die type of games. You know what I mean?
That's very morbid, but yes, I agree.
Very full on in a COVID era. But let's get on to the topic I really want to talk about.
The biggest news story of the week.
For me, I love it. The Hori Split Pad Pro, which is kind of a tongue twister actually when I try to say it each time. So there's 3 new colors. One is a bit of a riff on the original color, so transparent black. So they've removed some of the harsh reds on that. Introduced a red and a blue. We don't know when it's coming out in Australia. It's coming out in the US pretty soon. But yeah, I wanted to talk about this.
So integot, again, to butt in. By chance, what is the Split Pad Pro?
Oh yeah, I haven't
Could you
even
please
said that.
explain it?
I got so excited. So it's an alternative to Joy-Cons for the Nintendo Switch, and essentially they're just very wide and, sort of full size, for a full size man as I am, right? So it's like a much more comfortable experience.
They're the Joy-Con equivalent of the man-sized frozen meals in the Australian supermarkets.
Yes. Or bring it to more like a gaming sphere. It's like the OG Xbox controller.
Oh, that
versus
thing. Oh my god. The Duke. The Duke.
The Duke. It's like the Duke of Nintendo Switch. And then just also like, I'm getting to a point where like I really wish that they did release game. Like when the Switch came out, everyone's like, oh, they're going to have like NES ones, Super Nintendo ones, GameCube, and they haven't done any of that. And also they haven't released that many colors for the Joy-Con, which is kind of baffling to me just because Nintendo loves to make crazy accessories, like all the way through its history. Remember like Donkey Kong bongers? Like that was so cool.
Bonkers.
What is it called?
Bongo.
What's the game called?
No, it's called Donkey Konga, but they're not.
Oh, that's where I'm getting crazy. Yeah, that's where I'm getting confused.
I gotta say, Donkey Konga was absolutely awesome. I love that game.
And I was good at that game, man.
I even did the mode where you play through every song one after the other in one succession without a break. Oh my god, that thing was awesome.
I love that game actually. I only played it at your house. I never owned it, but yeah, that was a really cool game. I'd like to get that game one day.
I've still got them, but unfortunately the bongos get discolored on the top, so they look kind of gross. But anyway.
Oh, nice. I'm sure there's an aftermarket to get new skins on the bongos, which would be awesome. But yeah, and why I wanted to bring this up is because I'm kind of at a point where, I don't think Nintendo are going to release the GameCube Joy-Cons or a very special Pro Joy-Cons. So I'm kind of looking at this.
I don't understand. It's such an easy moneymaker to make.
Oh yeah.
Even if they look the same, right? Just to make versions that are the visual style of Super Nintendo with the buttons colored that way.
I know.
They've done that for the 3DS and things before,
yes,
so
correct,
they've only done it hardware-wise before. Doesn't make sense why they haven't done it for the Switch yet.
Yeah, I find it odd because, and that's what I was saying, because they do this. The amount of revisions to the 3DS, the DS, and the Game Boy Advance is insane. Like I've spent many hours looking through all the revisions, and it's like this revision didn't come out in Australia, and then when I'm on like Gumtree, oh okay, when I see this color, it's like, oh okay, someone's imported this from Japan. Like this isn't a local one, and like it's just so many. Whereas the Joy-Cons, there's a few to be fair, but compared to how popular it is, it's kind of a bit mind-blowing that it's not more. So yeah, for me, I'm kind of like going and then just like to bring in the awesome video. So there's a content creator who generated or created a functional GameCube Joy-Con controller, so you can switch it in, play it wirelessly. It has all the functionality. And I look at that thing and I'm like, damn, someone has got to do like a Kickstarter. Like you can't copy the exact shape of it, but you know, if you get pretty close, like that's what I want. But I just don't see that happening. So I am looking at these Switch Pad Pros, and the only thing I didn't like about it was the color of them. So now that they got more, you know, just the black is like a nicer color, I might actually look at it when it comes out in Australia and pick them up, unfortunately. Just because, you know, the analog sticks on the Joy-Con. Well, it's just, I don't want to get them, but then the analog sticks are just horrible on the Joy-Cons. Right?
Oh no, I had to buy these cool controllers for my Switch. That's so unfortunate.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't want to get them. I want to get like I want to get GameCube. I feel like as soon as I buy them, Nintendo are going to have like a direct and go, oh, and by the way, and then have like the GameCube thing slot on the sides, and I'm going to cry and go, oh, why have I bought this?
No, but why are you going to cry? You've already got them.
I'm going to try to refrain. I'm pretty bad with this kind of stuff.
Look, considering how obsessed you are with the analog stuff that you all just purchased, I don't think you want to hold back.
Also, the power of my, what I say. Like last week I said, we're not going to talk about analog again for a long time. And we're talking about analog right now.
So, we would have known.
Well, like I love analog stuff, and I love anything retro, like especially, when it comes to high def stuff. So either the best way to play it in one dimension, so which is like play it digitally, or the best way to play it from a analog perspective, which is like RGB. But yeah, like I wasn't anticipating that we'd bring up analog again, but in between these two podcasts, so last week when we finished, strangely enough, Analogue posted on Twitter, hey, we've reopened the Analogue NT Mini Noir pre-order. So the Analogue NT Mini Noir is the second revision of their Nintendo/Famicom clone system. So this is the more higher end version of the Super NT. Super NT is like plastic. It only does digital, so HDMI, whereas this is aluminium and has analog, digital. They rebuilt the NES core, and it's got a better cartridge slot, which was a big problem with the first version of it. It's a lot more pricey, so it's $499 US. And it seems like what's happened is people, like the pre-order was earlier this year for this system. I think because they've delayed it and, the whole COVID situation, Analogue has been honoring cancellations and giving people money back. So I think they've just had so many orders like bulk up, and they've just said, all right, we've got to reissue this because we're making this many. So, we need to get these sold again. So they announced it on like the 11th. And then one day later, exactly like 24 hours later, the pre-orders opened and the pre-orders sold in 2 minutes. And just again, so many people were annoyed. Like, what? We couldn't buy it. This is BS. Like, what the hell? So yeah, people are getting a little bit frustrated with Analogue at this stage.
Can I ask a huge request of you, integot? Maybe following on, I'm asking another big request, like, you getting that rare RPG from Hong Kong for me.
Yeah.
This one's not as bad. Next time they've got the Super NT and they announce, hey, we're going to, like, do some, like, I'm assuming I can't get the Super NT right now. Is that the case? Like, it's not
last time I checked, it was sold out, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's they had a second run of it not too long ago.
I've seen, don't they have like a fancy, like super nice black one that's like a super rare one or something?
Yeah, that's what I've got.
Yeah, okay. next time you see they're actually like going to put that up, can you let me know? Because out of all their products, that's the one that appeals to me the most because it's the Super Nintendo, you know. So just
that's why I've got it.
Just shoot me a link if you think they're actually going to put them up again. That'd be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I look. I think I'm only guessing here, but I feel that the direction they're going is they will re-release the Super NT, and currently the Mega SG, so that's the Genesis / Mega Drive clone. You can still buy that right now, but I think they'll keep bringing it back in stock in small runs, and then like waiting until it's sold out. So
I do need something to find. I found a random copy of, not random. Obviously I knew where it came from, but a copy of Jungle Book on SNES in my shed the other day, and I'm like, man, this is just like being sitting behind a box somewhere. This thing is so dusty that I need to I don't know the best way to de-dust cartridges these days, but I need to use like industrial friggin' blower to blow it out. But it's just like, man, this game has been mistreated. I need to give it some love at some point. That game was so hard, Jungle Book on SNES. I don't know if you ever played it, but that game,
I remember you had it, man.
Difficult. Man, I don't think I ever beat it because of how difficult it was. And back then, when you had a game on the SNES, we're both kids, we didn't have a lot of money to go buy new games. So if you got a game, even if it wasn't that great, like Jungle Book's not that great, you played it, and you tried to beat it, and you just, that's all you had to play, the games you had, so.
Yeah, it was a very different era. Like, there weren't as many games even coming out in general. So, and I felt like most people on average had, like 5 games maybe on average. Like, some people I knew had more, some people had a little bit less maybe, but it wasn't like a huge amount of games. It's not like these days, even with kids, they have so many more games on their systems just because there's more games out, and they're probably like much cheaper compared to what they were when we were around. But yeah, I'll let you know. Like, I'm sure, well, now I'm committed to making any update about anything analog. But I just thought it was funny given the context of everything that happened, that they did open up the pre-orders and sold out again, and people got really annoyed. My view is, and what I've been waiting for is, I feel like they will release a cheaper tiered version, so pretty much a plastic version of the Mini NT, or the NT Mini I should say. I feel like they will make a plastic version of it and sell it and be like $199 US, and when they do that, or if they do that I should say, I'll probably pick that one up. I've got another request. Yeah.
So you know how you did that awesome analysis of the Analogue Pocket versus the Cybertruck orders last
very accurate. Yeah.
Next time they announce a new product, can you like do another one of those, but like find something that's like even more random, like I don't know, like a popular KitchenMaid appliance or something? I just want to see that analysis again, but getting even weirder. That'd be great. Thank you. I'll just keep adding these requests as we continue on the rest of the podcast.
No, we'll do. I'm sure there'd be other things that Analogue does that is a bit of a head scratcher. And just the last thing I wanted to point out is the thing that's making me laugh at the moment around this product and Analogue in general is people are now having big arguments about how Analogue says that they don't make emulators. Like, for instance, the Pocket, the Super NT, it's not an emulator. And, people are having this huge argument online. I don't call them emulators. I don't think they're emulators. I think that, to me, the word emulator is, you're trying to replicate, but you might not match it. I like to use the word clone because I think they're really trying to clone the inputs and the outputs, and that's what the FPGAs do. But it's not a one-for-one copy. So, I think there's a fair point in both sides.
I just think, when I think emulator, and this is completely from a very ignorant standpoint on everything to do with these kind of stuff, I think of emulation as just basically using software to achieve everything,
Yeah, no, and that's right.
As opposed to any hardware components that are kind of, as you said, like cloning or replicating the original hardware.
Yeah, and like, not going down a crazy rabbit hole, which I easily could, but, from a software emulation point of view, you're running the code on your computer, which has a certain clock speed, which is not ever going to be in a multiple of these original systems. You know, for instance, with the SNES, it was like 3 megahertz or something like that. Whereas these systems, they actually replicate lots of stuff, you know, including like the clock speeds and like all of this kind of stuff. So it's like, for me, I you know, they are trying to make it so that you put a input in and it does some magic, and then the output is trying to be reference. So it's trying to be exact from an input output point of view. So for me, it's like, you know, I feel like it's more of a clone of what it is, and you'd never say that like, you know, the first version of a PlayStation versus the last few revisions of a PlayStation, oh, they're emulating the PlayStation, because it works differently. But the key is, it's like the inputs and the outputs are the same, so, you know, it is the same thing. So I don't know, that's where I fall on it. I think it's kind of funny. It doesn't matter. It's just people's views on it, and, you know, like, they do a great job at making it as one-to-one as possible. So moving on to more of this crazy style retro stuff. And, you know, like, I love this kind of stuff. And for me, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. Because, you know, and this is where I think we're pretty different. Like, I hate playing things on something where it's not accurate. So, you know, one of the big things for me is, like, I don't have a good way to play old PlayStation games. But I also don't like playing it on the PS3 because it's a bit weird, and the emulators on Windows is just horrible. So there was a new solution for me for this recently with the announcement of PS1 Digital. So just to summarize it, essentially what it is they're taking the digital signal. So like everything from a console perspective is digital and then gets converted at some point into an analog output. Like, you know, through normally composite cables, component cables, if you're lucky, that kind of thing. This mod to the PlayStation is, it takes a digital signal, like straight off the hardware, and then pulls it through HDMI. So you're getting like the clearest picture you could possibly have on like a flat screen TV. And it does lots of important stuff. For instance, you know, it does instant 240p to 480i switching. And the reason why that's important is because lots of solutions, when they switch, it actually makes the flat screen TV pause for a second. So it's like a lot of PlayStation games do this switch because they're switching from stuff like gameplay to full motion video. So if it's switching out and your TV's turning on and off, it's really frustrating and it would kind of piss you off and make you not like the mod. So yeah, this is like super promising, and there was a really awesome video from Digital Foundry on the mod, and they love it, and I really rate their opinion on it. And for me personally, it's something I'm definitely looking to pick up, because I think this is like a real perfect way for me to get into PlayStation, which I'm sort of, you know, I've played a fair few PlayStation games, but I'd love to go back and play Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 on the PlayStation itself, but on the original hardware rather than through emulators or through all these new versions that have been released on the Switch.
Yeah, honestly, with everything with the PS1 Digital, it just reminds me of Bleem. I just think back to Bleem and Bleemcast. Did you actually ever try Bleem?
Yeah, so I did try Bleem, but again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying, that I don't like it unless it's really accurate. So yes, I did play like the Z SNESs and the SNES 9X back in the day, but they're fairly accurate, to be honest, even for those days. Whereas Bleem, I think, to be fair, I had like a hacked version, and I just didn't like it. I didn't think it was like accurate enough. It just kind of bothers me.
I'm not saying the Bleem was accurate in any way. I just love. Not only do I love the word Bleem, but I love the story of Bleem. Like, if you've ever just like reading about the lawsuits, and changed. They changed laws because of that, I believe.
Yeah, no, totally. That was a huge thing. I mean, like, really, PlayStation 1 was smashed by like piracy in lots of different ways. We should do a deep dive on Bleem one day, because it is really, really interesting. Like, even having a commercial emulator is like a kind of crazy concept at the time.
I've never delved into hacked consoles or whatnot, with the exception of the PlayStation 1 because everyone did at the time. It's horrible to think, but everyone had a chipped PlayStation. I remember going around to someone's house and they had a whole setup. They were basically making, they were making pirated PS1 discs and selling them out of their home. And you go in there and they had an entire wall full of CDRs to basically burn Die Hard Trilogy and all that onto.
That was cool, that game.
Oh, Die Hard Trilogy was amazing. But it was just like, it was what you did then. And then, like, I would buy like your Final Fantasy 7 and 9 and that. So there were definitely games that I wanted to purchase. But it definitely made you go, I'm only going to play this game, let's say Devil Dice or something, for like 20 minutes and then I've had enough, because you spent, what, $1 on it or $2 or something. So I can completely understand why they went after Bleen because they're already having so many issues across the board with that. But look, any way to play old games that are very difficult to play these days, PlayStation 1 included, I'm all for. Obviously, there's a grey area when you start talking about the actual ROMs themselves, which is trickier. But yeah.
Yeah, and just thinking about back in the day, because it was crazy, and it's very hard for people to imagine it right now, just given the context of how you buy games and how easy it is and ubiquitous and cheap, really, compared to what it was. But I remember our mutual friend Danny, he, like, I was at his house one time, and it's like he had a dealer. He had someone he called, and they would come over, and he'd be like, on the phone, he'd be like, what kind of games do you have? Oh, you got this game. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll get one of those. What is that, $2? Okay, cool. Right? It was like, it was crazy. Whereas you look at that now, imagine having a dealer for video games. It's just wild. It was so ubiquitous. But I think for me back in the day...
about it was like the equivalent of a meth lab setup when I went in that house where they manufactured the pirated PS1 games.
Yeah, because you could just buy everything, like, off the shelf, like CD presses, printing press, all that kind of stuff. And people didn't really care how good it looked. So, yeah, like, for me back then, I probably did pirate a lot of games, to be fair. I don't do that now, obviously, but the reason why I'm so interested in this stuff now is because it's so hard to get these games. Like, you do buy a used copy of Final Fantasy 7, and then it doesn't work. Because either the CD doesn't work, or the PlayStation's optical drive has failed, and that's where I think for me, the cartridge system was just superior because they still work. Like, you get your Jungle Book cartridge and you bring it up to my house, and it will work in the Super NT, and you got it on the screen. It's crazy, right?
I think it needs to be a bit cleaned first.
Yeah, you don't want to damage my hardware. Whereas, with PlayStation and disc drives, like, it is a worry. And, that's why you're also starting to see alternatives. Like, there's one, and it's actually Australian, PSIO, where they use the parallel IO port of the PSX to actually load in games. And there's also a hardware mod that you need to solder on. And there's a new one coming out, which I'm more interested in, which is the X Station. And this is kind of the new trend, what they're doing. It's like an optical drive emulator. So again, uses an FPGA. And then it's pretending to be an optical drive and then feeding out and feeding in the inputs and outputs to the console. So in this case, the PlayStation. And they've already done this for Saturn and Dreamcast. So that's already working. And you can actually just buy one module and then install it. And it's all plug and play. It's not even a mod or anything for the Saturn and the Dreamcast. And yeah, like, it does mean that, it enables piracy essentially, but, a lot of these games, like, they're not being sold new, and it's actually hard to get them. And as I said, the actual drives themselves are failing. So for me, I love this old stuff and getting it either to my monitor setup and then I can capture the footage or play it on, my Trinitron with component cables, like this is kind of the way that I'm going to go. So I'm going to keep my eyes on this and see if I can get this in Australia. So then I can start going back and playing some PlayStation games.
The approach I take, and I've taken this ever since I ever found out emulation was a thing, which was from you, is I don't enjoy emulation or piracy of any current generation, or let's say the last generation, but anything kind of earlier than that, especially when it gets harder to play these games, definitely harder to track them down if if you want to own them legit. The whole thing of you need to own the actual physical copy for this ROM to not be against the law in whatever US state that random thing was taken from. It's that's so difficult to do. There's so many Super Nintendo games and N64 games that unless you're collecting them, which is a very different purpose. A lot of people are collecting games not to play them. It's so hard to find them, unless you want to go out and spend thousands of dollars on them. So, and not only that, but we've talked about before, some of these games weren't released in Australia. A lot of these games weren't released in Australia. Like, until certain, I guess re-releases on PlayStation consoles, we could never play Final Fantasy VI in Australia.
Which
the
is so
only way
wild,
you could do that was either importing, which may, there's legalities there with the importing, but the only other way was emulation. So I had no problem emulating games I couldn't play. But if there's games that have just come out, and let's say Game Boy Advance era, I remember when Game Boy Advance era was in, that was the current Nintendo handheld, and there were emulators right away almost for it. I remember, they were probably not great, but I remember being like, oh man, I can just emulate these things. But I'm like, well, this is a new game that only came out like 3 months ago, and it's a ROM already, So that's where I'm not a fan of that stuff, just simply because I think we've talked a little before, but it kind of devalues the games for you as well, because suddenly you'll die once or twice, and you would just say, "Oh, bugger this," and I'll just move on to the next game.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. When people, as a gift for my wife's dad, because he's really hard to buy for, and he loves gadgets and stuff, but he's very, very hard to buy for. And I was like, I know that he liked Nintendo and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, and he's very funny with stuff. Like, he does like an abundance of things. So I actually made like this retro pie thing, which had like every NES, Game Boy, Super Nintendo game on it, Genesis, everything, right? I found ways to get every single thing working, got it all set up, got a Super Nintendo style controller, and man, he loves this thing so much. But I'm more like you, which is like, when there's too many things, it actually kind of just devalues everything. So I've kind of gone, no, I'm just gonna like, like for instance with a PlayStation, I'm really keen to get this so then I can go and get like Final Fantasy VII, just play that, and then, play through other games, play Metal Gear Solid again, because I played that at the time, just kind of relive some of that stuff, and also get exposed to games that I hadn't played before. So no, like I love this kind of stuff, and I'm always keeping my eyes on some of the bigger developments. There's always little things that happen. But I thought that this one was quite a chunky one and quite an exciting thing for PlayStation, because it's never had a solution where it can output from a pure 100% digital perspective through to HDMI. So I think that's really, really cool. And going to the Atari VCS, so I just wanted
to raise... Talking about cool.
Well, cool. It's cool, dude. In the 80s. Look, I just want to raise this. This is not news in terms of, the Atari VCS is coming out, but, we're just talking about Australia and things not coming out in Australia, but it is coming out in Australia, this thing, which I was kind of surprised about. And we saw confirmation from one of our local distributors, the equivalent of a GameStop in America, EB Games, over in Australia, that the Atari VCS is coming to Australia. And the whole bundle, so that's got the classic controller, the modern controller, and the base unit, it's going to be 850 Australian dollars. Thoughts, Swinny?
I was just trying to bring the listing up, but it's made me do that. Please click on each image containing a boat. So just let me... Okay, that's a boat. 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 That's a boat.
Oh, you're
Wait,
getting
they're
like
all
blocked.
boats. Oh no, that's a canoe. Actually, I've selected like 3 canoes instead of boats.
The
Okay, that's
machine's
a
probably
boat. That's a
better
boat. That's a boat. That's a canoe. That's a boat. Okay, I should be through now. Oh no, it's bugger that. All right. All I was going to say is I looked at the listing earlier. It's refreshed it now. It's asking for trains, so I'm like bugger that. I was looking at the listing earlier, but I wanted to bring it up again because doesn't it still say on there? Like it doesn't give any dates or anything, and it's like such a vague time frame.
Yeah, supposed to come
So-
out this year. They reckon it will come out this year, but it does.
So-
It's very weird.
You're putting up $800 listings for something that you haven't even got a date for. That's ridiculous to me. Like that isn't, let's say Xbox, PlayStation, like those are things that I can kind of understand because pretty certain those things are going to come out or, they're going to deliver on what you expect them to. This thing is the VCS is just a mess. And
It's weird, right?
who's going to spend $800 on this? Like, seriously.
Well,
To play what's basically a PC in a way, like there's a whole mode, what they call sandbox mode or whatever in this thing.
Yeah, that's right. They literally call it sandbox mode, which is like they're not even trying to dress it up.
Oh man, like I love my first video game console was an Atari, right? 7800 or whatever or 5800, whatever, right? It was one of the classic Atari consoles.
Probably would have been the 2600. I doubt it would have been the other ones.
Oh, okay, 20, whatever, right? I'm clearly knowledgeable, just randomly bringing that up, but
You should have a podcast about gaming. So on top of it,
well, we don't position ourselves as retro gaming. I wouldn't say. I don't anyway. You may. Half the topics have been retro, but the thing for me, so I have love for that era of gaming. A lot of those games are absolutely terrible, but they were the only thing you had. I just don't see the appeal of this one. I really don't. Atari's obviously a very weird company. They're basically a licensing company these days. They've got their hotels, they've got their Atari Bitcoin, whatever their thing is, and they had the radio, the Atari like speaker hats or something. I just don't understand.
That's right.
I just do not
the headphones, I
understand
think.
Atari anymore. They're just.
Well, it's not Atari, right? Like it's a company that's bought the rights to call themselves Atari and release things. And yeah, I think my only comment about this that I thought was odd is, I kind of get this in America. You probably, it's like 350 million people there. Atari was huge back in the day in America, and you got to get a certain percentage of people buying this, and I don't get it. It's silly to me. But Australia is a little bit different. Like we did have Atari. I'm the same as you, 2600. I remember there was a mouse game. It was like a Pac-Man clone, but it was like mice and rats and stuff like that. And I just remember it was the first game I ever played.
So interesting. I actually had 2600 Junior. That one looked so much cooler than the normal 2600.
I don't know what that is, so I'm just checking it out now.
Look up 2600 Junior, and it had like the metal with the color across it. That's the one that I had.
I like the 2600. You like the Junior?
The Junior looked so much cooler, man. And it had the buttons.
I like the
were like these
2600.
buttons that you click down. It was really cool.
Yeah, I kind of like the aesthetic. Like, and by the way, with the VCS, I think it looks cool in the renders. Whether it will look like that, like in real life, I doubt it, to be honest. Yeah, it's just, I don't really get it in Australia, especially, because it just wasn't as big in Australia as because it was different. We didn't have like a video game crash like they did in the States, because everything came out later, and then the NES came out over here, and that was really big when we were growing up. It was Mousetrap. That was the game, the very first game I ever played, that I remember. What? Yeah, so
Mousetrap video game. Was it based off the board game?
No, well, let me just confirm this.
I mean, that's probably not, but I'm just like, Mousetrap.
No, well, I don't think it's based on the... Yeah, this is definitely the game that I played. Yeah, so you play as a mouse, and you're running around, and then, like, cats are chasing you. It's 100% a Pac-Man clone, and I'm just looking at it, and no, it doesn't look like it has anything to do with the board game.
Oh, no, that's fair enough.
I should actually buy this. This is kind of like a cute thing to buy, isn't it? But yeah, like, so all I was coming from is it just doesn't have the same nostalgia value in Australia as I would imagine it would have in the US. And we're already such a smaller market, and this is just an odd item. Like, I'm actually, when I go to EB next time, I'm going to ask them and just keep
Oh
asking
yeah.
them about how is this selling? Because, man, you couldn't imagine it would be that much, right? Surely.
Not to discredit, there's obviously some people that work at the EB Games that do know their stuff, but I can tell you, I'm pretty confident most of them have no idea what the Atari VCS is that are
Yeah,
working
look,
in the stores themselves.
so, I think I'm fairly nice to people. And what you're saying is 100% true because, dude, like, I go and talk to them about stuff that's massive. Like, hey, Animal Crossing, the console, how they've got a themed console special edition for the Switch. And they're like, oh, I don't even know what that is. What are you talking about? I'm like, what? This is like one of the biggest games of the year, and you don't even know what I'm talking about? Like, I feel like
I
if you
think
work at a game store, you should know that.
I think sometimes, like, there's one in Melbourne, that's it's basically, I guess you've
The
got like the
flagship
EB
one in the
games,
city.
yeah, yeah, and then you got like the upper level, it's like Nintendo one, and I don't know technically if the people working in the Nintendo section are EB Games employees and Nintendo employees, but generally
Mm.
when I've spoken to people there in the past, they've actually known their stuff,
Yeah,
so
they're really good,
that's
that
a bit
one
of
in
a
the
different
flagship
setup.
store. Yeah,
Yeah,
like they don't have a flagship store in Sydney, which is kind of annoying because I'd like if they had that up here. But yeah, in Melbourne they have a really good one, but in Sydney there's nothing like that. Like the Melbourne one's the best one in the country that I've seen. But yeah, we don't have one like that. So yeah, this Atari VCS, I don't get it. I'm definitely not buying it. I just don't know who this is for. It's very boggling to me, mind-boggling that this is really a thing.
it's going to go as well as the Coleco Chameleon.
Yeah, I think I'll leave that to other podcasters that we listen to for them to go on rants about because it's not interesting to me. All right, well, let's get into our favorite segment, bargain bin, starting with
We
the Epic
we
Game
really
Store.
need like some kind of like audio leading to like be like the bargain bin or something,
Yeah, and
and
I
then
want to
like
have like
money.
ching ching
Yeah, like
wah!
Pink Floyd money.
Do
We
do do
couldn't
do.
use their clip because we'd probably get like banned on YouTube. But
Yeah, they'll scan it for sure. No, yeah, we should. And let's start with the Epic
boom
Game Store
boom
and just
boom
just
boom.
just a quick update. So we did warn people and we reminded people constantly about a total War Saga Troy being free for 24 hours, and obviously you listened because we had 7.5 million downloads on the Epic Game Store, which is, it's interesting as well. It just kind of shows how big and ubiquitous the Epic Game Store has become as well.
And
So
we looked at the stats, right? And I think we calculated that potentially two people may have actually been attributed to us.
well, that's 2 free games. So, and we're going to keep delivering. So the free games right now are Remnant from the Ashes, Alto Collection 3 out of 10, Episode 2, Foundation 101, and they're free until Thursday the 20th of August. What I'm always interested in is, what are the free games for next week? This week, God's Trigger, and then the big one is Enter the Gungeon, which, like, I love that game. I already have it on multiple platforms, but yeah, that's such an awesome game. Have you got that on PC, Enter the Gungeon?
I've never played that game.
Whoa! Okay, you definitely need to grab this. I know you probably already have it on Game Pass or wherever it's available,
No,
but
I'll grab it, and I certainly believe it's a good game. But it's we've mentioned I think last week. It takes a lot to get me excited about anything that has rogue in its kind of description, whether or not it's roguelike or roguelite. And I know this game is meant to be brilliant. And I've heard good things about Exit the Gungeon that was on Apple Arcade as well, even though it's a very different style of game. But the thing for me, and I think a lot of people probably would understand this, is I've got so many games that I'm very interested in playing.
yeah.
So it takes a lot to get me to play a game that I'm not really interested in playing, even if it's free. But hey, maybe I'll give it a shot. Maybe it's part of broadening the Swinny horizons or something.
Swinny Explores, the college edition. Swinny Swings.
No, definitely not called Swinny Swings.
I want a bumper that says that. But yeah, like, and again, it's just showing me materializing things. Where I was talking about Enter the Gungeon last week, I think, and how good that game was.
Yes, you have the power. Can you please start talking more about an F-Zero sequel, please?
No. I shall say that Nintendo in the next couple of weeks is going to announce Metroid Prime 5. No, sorry, Metroid 5, not Metroid Prime 5.
Metroid Prime 5
Coming out in 2036. Metroid Prime 5. So that's the Epic Game Store Bethesda. So they've also got, as part of QuakeCon at Home, they had, and so we've missed it already, Quake for free, but Quake 2 is free right now. So at the time of publishing, you should be able to still get it. And then on the 17th of August, Quake 3 Arena will go free. So you got to get the Bethesda game launcher, and then you can, as always, install it or like add it to your library, and it'll be free forever on that launcher. I actually was looking at getting Quake. I already have Quake and Quake 2. I've bought them recently, or like the last few years when they're on sale. But Quake 3 Arena I was thinking about picking up, but given that it's free, I'll definitely grab that one. And then
I think with
Nintendo
that game, though,
go on.
so if you were interested in playing Quake 3 Arena, I think you probably... I don't know where Quake Live is at these days. I believe they Did they shut it down? Quake
No,
Live?
so it's a bit of a shame, the whole situation. I'm a huge Quake fan. So Quake's in a really bad space at the moment because I think the community is pretty split. So there's still a lot of people that play Quake Live. So I think what you were about to refer to is it's still free. It's not free. You have to pay for Quake Live now.
But it's still up. Like it's still
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. But you've got like Quake Champions, and then you got Quake Live, and it's a bit like, you kind of, I get it. Like, the community is split because it's a little bit like Smash, I guess. Probably most people would say Quake Live's the better game, but Quake Champions is the new one. And, it's not a huge community in the first place, so it's not one that you'd want to split over a couple of games. I am really hoping one day that, that they'll release a new Quake game that really everyone loves and, builds that community back up again. Because I think it's an awesome, awesome game. I love those kind of really technical, competitive games. So yeah, no, but again, pick it up. But I get what you're saying. If you're going to play this style of game, you'd probably play Quake Live or Quake Champions. So Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, so as we know, Switch always has sales on, some good, some not so good. But I actually just had a look this what's up and actually thought I'd make some recommendations. So basically looked through and I've mentioned Earthlock before, so it's actually 80% off on Nintendo Switch at the moment. Puyo Puyo Champions, which I have on Xbox One and I just repurchased on the Switch after seeing this. That's 60% off as well. That's the kind of game that I think is perfect for the Switch. Also got Valkyria Chronicles 1 and 4 both discounted. 1 at 60% off and 4 at 62% off. I'm like, what? That's the most random percentage amount. Everything else is like an exact even amount, and they chose 62% off. And the last one is Shining Resonance Refrain, which is actually a pretty fun action RPG. That's at 60% off. I think that'd actually be a really good pickup for the Switch because I think it'd just be just nice. It's a very kind of segmented action RPG, so good, I think, for people that are in transit and that. So yeah, some highlights from the current Switch sales.
Nice. And no updates that I've seen from a PlayStation perspective. There's a couple of deals, but nothing that really sort of blows me away. But it's good to hear some thoughts around Switch because we really haven't seen any really big sales in Australia or in a US market sense.
Yeah, and I mean, we're about to get into Xbox as well with this, but it does feel like Switch always has, these weekly offers, but not only is it a pain to search through them, I'm sure there's probably better ways online to do it that I've got to look up, and maybe you already know integot, but it just feels like not only do they recycle the same games in and out, but there's games that are just in there, just obviously that are discounted oh, it's normally $80 and they're discounting it 99% and it's $1 and they're rorting the system. It just seems like a real bad approach to like a user experience. But hey,
Yeah.
they probably make a lot of money, so what can I say? It's probably working out pretty well for them.
Well, and those developers, they kind of view it as they have to do that to get any visibility in the store. And, it's kind of the stupidity of the way that Nintendo is running that storefront that, like, I don't even look at it. I never look at the Nintendo eShop because it's so, to me, busted the way it works. So what I look at, to your question, I guess, is I look at Deku deals. So DEKU deals.com. So basically, like, this works for Australia, the US, like whatever territory you're in. And then they have a really cool filter that's the front page filter as well from memory. It basically, you can look at like deals that people think are like worthwhile. So in the sense that, you can add deals or like games to your wish list. And when they go on sale, you get an email and you can kind of like trigger it at certain price levels. But then they use that interest level to judge, oh, this game's really popular and it's on sale and it's like the lowest price ever. So they do their own ranking based on that. Something that like Nintendo could do. But I find that to be the best way to look at it. So for instance, you know how you mentioned Valkyria Chronicles. That is the number 1 and 2 deal. So Valkyria Chronicles 4 and then the first game are the top 2 deals on DQ deals. So it's a cool way to look at it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
cool.
on the Xbox front, there's actually a pretty big sale that went up I guess 2 days ago as the time of this publishing. So a whole bunch of games as part of their Ultimate sale. So I'm not going to point any out because it's just too many, but there's a whole bunch of games. I did actually go to get Divinity Original Sin 2. It was 50% off. So I'm like, okay, awesome. Finally, I've been waiting for this. And I went to purchase it and I already owned it. And I'm like, God, I clearly
What do you
a long
mean?
time ago.
What?
I already owned it and I forgot. So I'm like, oh, damn it. So
That's
I was
awesome.
like, I was so excited about it. But yeah, actually, honestly, on that, I use True Achievements for this. So basically, you can add stuff similar to what you're saying with that Nintendo Switch stuff. Not as detailed, but you can add stuff to your wish list, and then you get notifications when that stuff goes on sale. So, yeah, cool.
No, nice. Yeah. And I think like for this segment, especially where there's really one-off sales that we've never seen before or free games, probably the biggest things we're going to shout out, or as part of the subscriptions to Xbox Live or PlayStation Plus. Cool. Well, let's get into our final segment of today and our special feature. So, our
Been waiting for
replay,
this one. Been waiting for this one.
Donkey Kong Country. I think we flagged it in our first podcast.
I think we
that,
did.
Hey, this game's coming out. This is going to be part of the Nintendo Switch Online, so the Super Nintendo Virtual Console, essentially. It's coming in as part of one of the games that you can play there. It's one of the big games that I guess most people sort of thought was weird that wasn't available initially when it came out. So we decided we'd play it. We haven't checked in. This is the first time we've discussed this.
Exactly.
I'm assuming that you've beaten the game.
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
I'm not going to start Donkey Kong Country for the purpose of talking about it and not complete it, because it's, as much as it took us a month to actually start talking about it, it's not the longest game. It's a pretty short game if you don't struggle too much. So
I think you were like implying pressure on me by saying, "Hey, it's not that long of a game." Like offline when we were just chatting about it. You're like, "Hey, it's not that long of a game. Like we should play it." E.g., you should finish it. So, do you want to ask me whether I've beaten it or not?
I know you've beaten it.
Have I told you?
No. You said you were getting close to the end, but I know you would have beaten it.
No,
it would
I
have
haven't beaten
eaten
it.
you up inside if you didn't beat it. I reckon.
100%.
You would have been like, God damn it, I didn't
But
beat
the
it.
question is, how did you play it? Like, so okay, first off, I should say I played it on the Switch. So, given that we said, hey, it's coming out on the Switch, I thought, well, I'll play it there. That's where it's coming out, rather than play it on my Super NT. Where did you play it, and how did you play it?
I played it on the Switch as well. So
Okay.
I used the Pro controller.
Okay. And then, like, when I say also, how did you play it? E.g., the Nintendo Switch has the inbuilt functionality, so you can save states, load states,
Oh, yeah.
rewind. This is very controversial because some people get really riled up. Like, hey, you can't say you've beaten this game. You've used save states or you've used a rewind feature. That's not beating the game. By the way, I don't care about that kind of stuff, but I know people get real wound up about it. So yeah, how did you play it?
Oh, I just played it normally. So the only reason I used save states was just to make it easy to come back to the game and make sure I didn't lose progress. So
Oh, okay. So
the
if you
game the
die,
game gives you the game gives you so many lives, and you can easily farm the lives as well if you struggle. So
So I abused the hell out of the rewind feature.
oh, what?
I did not lose a life.
Oh my god! Oh, you did that just to say that, didn't you?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't, dude. The thing is that I realized.
So does that mean
especially
did you beat K. Rool on the first try because you used rewind?
No, rewind. Yeah, I rewind it.
Oh, sheesh. Now,
Actually, I
see,
didn't
I'm going to be
struggle.
one of those people right now and say, for the purpose of this, that's bullshit. That is bullshit.
Look, the thing is, like, okay, I'll say a couple of things. First off, I used to be a little bit like that, and not precious about it. I'd just be like, hey, you probably don't say that you've beaten the game. And even when I said I've beaten the game, I was kind of being a bit jokey. Like, I completed the game, I rolled the credits, whatever you want to kind of say about the game. I got through the whole game one way or another. But I think the thing is, especially when you become a parent and you don't have as much time, and I've got a full-time job and there's a lot going on.
It's a short game. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but dude, I don't have much time. Like,
no, I know, but that is not justification for a rewind that much. Like, okay, the rewind thing, right? Whatever, cool. But to do it to the point where you don't even lose a single life is ridiculous. That is overkill, man. Dude. That's like me and Battletoads. Like, Battletoads is a hard-ass game. I wouldn't have been able to get anywhere in that game. Donkey Kong Country is not a hard-ass game. It's tricky. See, I reckon that is bullshit.
Look, do I think that I could get through the game? I've beaten the game before when I was a kid, right? Like, 100% I think I could beat the game.
I know you could get through the game. It's a pretty easy game.
Well, I don't know. Easy. Was it easy? I'd say it's like easy to medium. But,
that's only because you weren't learning, because you were rewinding all the time, so you weren't getting better.
Oh, look, and this is kind of cutting into talking about the game. I think the game, and this is a big problem in old school games, I think the game can be a bit cheap. Like, there's enemy placements. It's kind of weird playing it again. You're so zoomed in, essentially. You can't see much of the frame of what's coming at you. And that's why you need a rewind feature. That, you die sometimes just because you don't know the level. But once you know the level, it's like, oh, this is really easy. So, yeah, probably easy on replay.
I agree it can be cheap. Like, it's cheap as hell, and it will randomly throw an enemy that's flying in when it's kind of you're expecting to jump, right?
Yeah.
But the whole point of this is about learning the layouts. It's like Mega Man, like any of this stuff. So I've no problem.
It's not a cheap game. Like, I just want to make it clear. I don't think it's a cheap game. I think it can be cheap at times. I just want to really make that clear.
Hell, it can be cheap. Like, I've got some, like, my thoughts on the good, and man, there's some bad there. But yeah, I guess I'd like to talk about the good before we get to the bad.
Yeah, sure.
Start talking about that.
So you've already lambasted me for the way that I played the game.
I think to that extent, like, I think that's a bit ridiculous. But I understand. Look, I know what you're saying, but to do it without losing a life is just ridiculous. Anyway, so
you can't say that you played it and didn't lose a life. Go on.
I lost. I don't know. I lost probably 30 something lives at the end of it.
Oh, that's pretty good. I would have lost way more than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, go on.
So to me, Donkey Kong Country. So the way I think about this. To me, this game is such a phenomenon when I was a kid. And I know it didn't, but to me as a kid, it felt like it came out of nowhere. And I don't know why. Like, I used to buy Total magazine in the UK. I used to love reading all the games magazines. And I don't know why, but this game, it came out very late into the the SNES lifetime. And it just kind of came out of nowhere, and I'm like, oh my god, I've never seen a game that looks like this. It was incredible. And also, Donkey Kong hadn't been a thing other than Donkey Kong 94 or whatever it's called on Game Boy. Donkey Kong hadn't been a thing for so many years, and this game just floored everyone. And I even remember, I don't know if this came out in anywhere other than UK, but when I got the game, I got it actually, I think, on release, which is crazy back then. I never got games on release. And it even had a music CD called Go Ape. And have you ever heard of this music CD?
No, I don't think that came out in Australia.
Right. Well, I definitely didn't think, because all the artists are basically UK artists, but no joke, it had Radiohead on it. It had Primal Scream. It had Oasis on it. It was like
That
8
sounds
bands
sick.
on it. It's crazy. It was Creep, Radiohead Creep. And man,
okay,
I
cool.
love this CD because I actually got into a lot of the bands from listening to it. And it's just
Awesome.
weird because it's the most un-Donkey Kong thing ever, this to have Radiohead on CD. But to go back to the game, right? To me, replaying it has really cemented the fact that, to me, this is one of the best pure platformers on the SNES. Because
Whoa,
when I
really?
say pure platformers, in that you're just running and jumping for 90% of it. Every now and then you'll run on you'll get on an animal friend, or you'll enter a bonus area, and obviously when I say running jumping, that includes, okay, you're in minecart jumping, or you're shooting out a barrel or whatever. But there's very little bullshit outside of it, really. And that's both good and bad. Like the DKC 2 and 3 started adding a whole lot more to it. But this game just felt like this is just a pure platformer. And I really liked that. And I think it still looks great, even without, the benefit of like CRT blurriness to like blur the jagginess of the sprites, and that I think still looks fantastic. And the thing as well, there's some crappy levels in this game. There really are some crappy levels. But if you don't like them, they're short enough that they don't outstay their welcome. Like, you can get through them pretty quickly. You're like, okay, this annoying level, I've got that behind me, but then there's a whole bunch of cool levels coming up. So and they're just full of secrets. That's just like some real mischievous stuff in this game, and they ran with that in the future ones, like just making things so hidden. It's so awesome.
Yeah, and I just want to ground the context of this game as well for everyone who maybe isn't as familiar. So this game came out in '94, but the era that we were in at that time, as we lived it, given how old we are, everything was 2D at that time. So games like Street Fighter 2, and then all the sort of spin-offs from that, Turbo and everything like that, Super Mario World, Zelda 3, all of these kind of games were like the apex of gaming, and like, how awesome does this look, this 2D game? And then in the background, Sony came along, and you had stuff like the PlayStation and all of those graphics, which, probably looking at it today, I feel like Donkey Kong Country looks better than PlayStation games, like from a 2020 lens. But at the time, everyone was like, wow, PlayStation looks amazing, right? But,
yeah, it's
you had this game where Nintendo was like seeing all this stuff happening, and, this company, Rare, in the UK, had done all this work around, using computer graphics, and then, basically taking a screenshot of the computer graphics into a 2D model. And then they were able to, create a game out of it that looked like insane. It looked like it was a 3D game sort of for back then. Obviously, you don't look at it as a 3D game now, but, back then it really kind of did look like it. And it sort of was like a weird next-gen game on a current-gen console is how I felt at the time. And especially, I wasn't going to be able to afford a PlayStation. I was like looking at it going, oh, this is unreal. This is like, we've got a next gen game on an awesome console, which was the Super Nintendo. So it was a huge game for Nintendo from my perspective. And I think they've even kind of commented post fact that this was a really important title for, getting through that generation and then onto the 64.
Also, it was, I believe, the third best-selling game on the console, and all three of the Donkey Kong Country games, I believe, in the top 10 selling games. So
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, it obviously it moved a lot of units, and you just had to look at this in a store because, as we're saying at the time, nothing looked like this game.
Yeah, it was crazy,
incredible.
right? And
Yeah,
like going to your point around how it looks, like so I played it. This game still holds up, man. Like, and I probably do veer a little bit retro with things, and I just think the 2D aesthetic just holds up way better than early 3D does. And we were just chatting about PlayStation. I still think that these games look better than the early, 64 and PlayStation games, and they've got their own kind of vibe to them for me. But this game looks unreal, and I know that there's been homebrew and community efforts, but a little dream of mine would be that they actually release like a trilogy of these games, with they're taking the original models and sort of just put more detail into them and just release it as like a standalone cart, because I just think that would be unreal. Like, just to have super high def version of this, but I wouldn't change that much about it at all, to be honest.
yeah. I think weirdly you might lose a bit of character from it though,
Maybe.
because I've seen that a lot with when they've created HD versions. Like we saw it with Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, when they
That's true.
redid all the sprites, and there were more problems to that game, I believe, from like frame data and like hitboxes and stuff. That it wasn't to do with that, but it looked great, but it just didn't feel right. Something it felt almost like manufactured, like a fake version. So I wonder if how that would work, but I guess from a presentation standpoint, this game is also, and continuing on to the other Donkey Kong Country games, also stand out in terms of music. This game has such incredible music that it's almost crazy. Like, I think no other Super Nintendo game sounds like this, and I don't know how they did it, other than obviously the sequels.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with where you're coming from around the music. I think the graphics are sort of always the obvious thing for people when they think about Donkey Kong Country, but I think the music of the trilogy, and there's certain tracks in there that I actually would literally put up there as just great pieces of music, probably from my perspective, are actually the height of the series and what the series actually has to offer. Like, if you had a look at it, would you say, if you had to rank the music versus the graphics or other parts of the game, what would you rank higher?
I almost like the music the most out of everything in the game, and the standout to me is and will always be, and it's my second favorite in the series, is Aquatic Ambience.
Yes,
The
yes, yes.
It's that song, just with the way it kind of like has, it's almost like delay effects in it, but obviously
Yeah.
it's like it's actually built into it. It's so amazing, that track, that other than Sticker Brush Symphony from number 2, which is kind of like the classic Donkey Kong Country song, those two songs together are just absolute bliss. And I think it's no, it's just shown wherever, if you look up chill SNES soundtrack, in YouTube, and people put these compilations together, and usually it's always got like Waterworld in it, it's always got Sim City in it, things like that. It's always got Aquatic Ambience every time. That's like the key song you have to have in like a chills soundtrack for SNES games. But I also like there's a song called Life in the Mines, which I think if you wouldn't probably know that one by name, but that is really really good as well. And the main theme, just the one that's playing on the title screen, is just so cool, and just sets the scene. I remember as a kid when it does the intro with Cranky, turning the record player, and it's like the 8-bit version main theme. Then it like brings in the drums and everything. It sounds so great, and I think that's just it sets us up for an awesome soundtrack.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, I look at, Donkey Kong Country, and just the trilogy in general. It's probably the only part of the trilogy that, like, to me is just perfect. And, like, sure, like, not every track is the greatest track, but something like Aquatic Ambience, you know, I reckon, you know, and I love to be a bit controversial, but, you know, I think you could mount a really reasonable argument to go that that's the best video game song ever. Like, it's such a good song. It's a killer. And also how they got that to get produced on the Super Nintendo hardware and all the hoops that they had to go through to get it done with the harmonics and everything. It was crazy. Like, they basically had to rig their own programming language to make it happen. There's some really cool YouTube videos on it. Yeah, the music is just perfect. Like, it was actually the thing when I was playing the game. I actually then had to go put headphones on so I could hear it more clearly. And then also I was just like, man, this music is just, it's not like an aged thing. It's just so good, so perfect, and just like unreal, actually. Like, and you kind of knew it at the time. I remember listening to these songs, and, you know, I know that we're talking about Donkey Kong Country, but Donkey Kong Country 2, it's, you know, like the music in that, even the title song in that, it just sets the tone so perfectly of that game. And how it's kind of got that darker, grimmer kind of, you know, feel to the whole game. Yeah, it's just unreal. Like, they've done such a good job on the soundtrack. It was mostly David Wise from memory, right?
Yeah, I believe there were other musicians, or at least I don't know if you. It's weird. Like, obviously, people who work in video game music are musicians, but also at that point they're probably also programmers. You know, it's like you would have had to have been probably jack of all trades in that era to make the most of it. But yeah, I believe there's also Evelyn Fisher and someone else that I haven't got the name of that I saw in the credits themselves of the game. But yeah, it's just so good, and it's kind of crazy because if you think about the challenge that they had ahead of them, okay, make a new Donkey Kong game. What do you have to work off in terms of soundtrack? You've only got the original couple of, you know, 3 Donkey Kong games plus the Game and Watch plus, you know, whatever cameos that he appeared in and things like Donkey Kong 94. You didn't have a lot of music to work off, and they essentially just created an entire sound for Donkey Kong that's persisted to this day. You know, every future Donkey Kong game has kind of followed along these kind of lines, and they created it.
It's for sure. And really, when you think about it, like, in almost everyone apart from anyone maybe above 40 or even 45, like, they have set what Donkey Kong is. And, you know, the whole, you know, we haven't even got into the fact of the Donkey Kong in the arcade game, like, what is it, 1982 arcade game, is not the Donkey Kong that you're playing, the main protagonist in the game proper. And, you know, that's also handled in a very fun way, in a very, you know, tongue-in-cheek, and also kind of a bit of a nod to the whole game, I think, way, which I really like.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember when Super Mario Kart came out, they had Donkey Kong in that, and I'm like, man, you know, Donkey Kong, I forgot all about Donkey Kong, you know, and everything. And then, like, he looked so different in that. And now they've just gone and created also this look for Donkey Kong that is now the default look of the, you know, the bit of kind of hair that's like I wouldn't say curled, but spiked at the top, and obviously the tie. All that stuff came from this game. You know, the look that everyone knows Donkey Kong now came from this game.
Well, I mean, even the one in Super Mario Kart on the SNES was Donkey Kong Jr., which is even kind of like weirder in a way, because it was...
I'll take that back then.
and no, but, you know, like, from what you're saying, I think the funny thing about it to me is, like, I kind of didn't really have any relationship with Donkey Kong. And, you know, kind of tying this in with an episode that we did a few weeks ago with some of the leaks that came out, you know, the Giga Leak and everything like that, how Super Mario World was meant to almost be, you know, there's some thoughts around maybe it was going to be Super Donkey World or something along those lines and actually feature Donkey Kong. So, you know, it's kind of, like, to me, a really interesting thing how I almost think because of the success of this game, it really just separated those two franchises. And now, if Donkey Kong appeared in, say, Super Mario Odyssey 2, I'd almost feel like that's odd. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely. Donkey Kong has its own series, but it's great that they're connected in some way.
Well, very, very closely, right? Because, Jumpman and Donkey Kong, they both appeared in the first game together, right? Like, I got
Yeah.
that right? Yeah.
In saying that, I mean Donkey Kong was in Odyssey, so
Wait,
just
was
in a
it?
different format. Yeah, remember in the celebration in New Dog City
Oh, yeah,
when
yeah,
you're in
yeah,
the
true.
2D version. So it's when I say that, it's more like homage, not Donkey Kong the 3D character, but it was cool that that's actually, I would say, the most that they've actually kind of connected in a mainline Mario game. Because if you think about all previous mainline Mario games, Donkey Kong's never even been mentioned, or the connection really.
That's
So
true,
the fact that
actually.
they had a whole celebration with Pauline in New Donk City, and it's like this is the city that Donkey Kong was set in. That's really cool. So
I, I know we're going on a mega tangent now, but like I do hope one time we do 2017 as a big wig game of some other year, because that game, we had arguments about it at the time about whether it's better than Breath of the Wild, and I know we haven't really gotten into your thoughts around that game yet, and we'll hold that off for a
that is
while.
like the most talked about hinted at thing in this whole
It's
podcast.
just
Sheesh.
it's the I like so I respect your opinion. We've known each other for a very long time, and I respect your opinion almost more than anyone else. But that your opinion you have of that game puts everything into question. That's the teaser that I have for people. But yeah, I just want to quickly say that that experience of Super Mario Odyssey, and like spoiler alert for Super Mario Odyssey for those who haven't played it. So that one with Donkey Kong, and then the part at the end of the game where they go back into like Mario 64. Like honestly, like and this sounds embarrassing, but I almost like got emotional, man. I was like, they executed it so perfectly, and it wasn't like cheap, and the nostalgia wasn't like, unwarranted. That I
Yeah.
was just like so into it, man. I was like, wow, this is so beautiful. Like it's just beautiful the way they did it. But yeah, going back to this game, like we haven't gone through all the components yet, but the one thing I have to say is, as I was playing this game, to me, and I think we do actually have different views of this game, and probably partly shaped by how we played it, because you got this game when it came out. I didn't get this game. I did play it, but I got Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Kong Quest, and for me, like almost, I think I pretty much played this game second after Diddy's Conquest. It just does feel like the, like almost final draft version before you've perfected it. Does
Oh
that make
yeah.
sense?
Oh, 100%. And it's one thing that's actually one of the reasons why I'm going to actually replay number 2 and 3 again, and then go on to Returns and Tropical Freeze. And I was hoping we could make a feature out of it. So, knowing that these games are, a bit shorter than some of the games for some other year that we're looking at, that it might be possible that, in a couple of months, or in a couple, I wouldn't say a couple of weeks, but let's say, in a couple of months we hit number 2 and then number 3 and that would be really cool, because I'd like to see that progression. I'd like to re-experience that progression. But I do think going from DKC2 to this one, definitely. And that, I guess, leads into my thoughts about what's not so good about the game.
Mm.
So for me, the bad is that the game's kind of bare bones. And the thing with that, it's to be expected in this era, right? A lot of games, especially non-Nintendo games, where you hit start, it's a platformer, you play through 10 levels, and that's it. You don't get any extras, right? So I'm not saying it's to be expected. But the problem is it's hard to judge this game in isolation when you've experienced the number 2 and number 3. And, up front, I've said it before, like, I know number 2 is your favorite and is the favorite of probably the majority of people. Number 3 is actually my favorite. And and I love number 2, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But
Oh, I know you love it. Yeah,
those two games have so much more to them that it does unfortunately kind of it casts a bit of a negative light on Donkey Kong Country 1, and that's why I talked about that to me, it's even of the three, it's the best pure platformer still because there's just less. It's more focused purely on that. There's not, you don't have to really worry about anything else, except the bonus barrels if you want to get the 100%. But it is kind of bad. I think once you've got those bonus barrels, there really isn't that much to do. I think even the future games added. I think I'm not sure. Wasn't there like a time trial mode you can unlock after you beat number 2 properly, or something like that?
I do recall that. Yeah, I do recall that. Yeah.
Or there was something anyway. It just felt like there was more to experience, and obviously a lot of that was also the secrets. So I don't know if that's kind of lines up with you about, hey, it's almost like a fully fleshed prototype of the series.
Yeah, I mean, like, partly. And, I'm much more forgiving, I think, than you. Just because the games of that era, they just weren't built like that. And a lot of it was just limitations, small team sizes, all that kind of stuff. So, like these days, they probably have 10 people, 12 people working on menu systems and UI and, how do you go in between the UI in a game? Whereas back then they had 12 people working on Donkey Kong Country, right? Like it's just a different totally era. So I'm more forgiving of that part. It's more, the game to me has a lot of rough edges and, like things where, the game really does feel cheap at times, certain enemy placements. I know it's about learning the levels, but at the same time, I never felt like that with Donkey Kong Country 2. Like, I feel like that game, they're challenges for you rather than just feeling a little bit rushed or like not rushed, but it's just inexperienced about how to make something to the level that they do with Donkey Kong Country 2, where I really look at Donkey Kong Country 2 and consider that to the same level as a Super Mario World. Like, I think it's that level of quality. Whereas this game feels a little bit offbeat at times. There's certainly, like, levels, and, we haven't gone into the specific levels, but things like the minecart levels, although, yes, they do have a few quirks and weird hitboxes and stuff like that, I think that they're awesome. And I think, like, even today, I find them really fun. And there's lots of levels in this game where it's like, oh wow, this is awesome. But then there's also parts of the game that I'm a bit like, oh, I'm just really looking forward to getting through it. And I didn't really kind of even enjoy the way it was structured or the way it was. And again, I'd have to play Donkey Kong Country 2 again. And, to your point around like, should we go through the games? I think that's a great idea because it did actually, after playing this game, go, oh man, I'm going to fire up Diddy's Conquest after this to kind of almost compare as well and just see how it evolves. But I'm pretty certain that there's a lot less of just kind of like levels where it's just kind of a bit annoyed or just one kind of cheap trick after the other. And it wasn't all the way through the game. It was just kind of like, I wish that they edited the game or like took certain bits out, but then the game's already pretty short and it'd be even shorter. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's why I kind of made the mention that there are some horrible levels, but thankfully they're short enough to get through. But any time that they threw, I think it was one of the ice levels, I can't remember the name.
Yes.
The snow level, I should say, not ice level, sorry. It's one of the snow levels where they had the orangutans throwing the barrels.
Yes, dude, that's so funny. That's exactly the level I was thinking about.
And you had the section where it's going up a hill, and then there was also like gaps to fall down. And I'm like, this is a bit of a ridiculous setup. Now, it's obviously possible. Like, I got past it. Yeah, everyone can get past it. But it's like, it's just designed to kill you the first time you go there. And it's not fun, that kind of section. And I think that they really learnt a lot from this game. When you think about what Rare or, Ultimate played the game or whatever they were called before Rare, they had never put together a game like this before, so they would have learned a lot from the process. And you do see that, I think, those improvements in number 2. Number 2 and number 3 still had a lot of sections where if you didn't know that what was going to happen, you were going to die. But it was, I think, handled in a very different way. Like number 2 to me is a way harder game than this game, but it's harder in a different sense.
But it kind of feels fairer, if that makes sense. And less frustrating, for me at least.
Well, it's more about the execution other than... Like, you're still learning, obviously, but it's more about, I screwed up because I didn't do that properly. as
Yes,
opposed to I died because the game threw something at me that no one would have ever expected.
Yeah, and that's where I feel like the game's a little bit cheaper, and like the other part of it is, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but my memory isn't that like Donkey Kong Country 3 and 2 have as many kind of weird input bugs or like, kind of hitbox issues.
Okay, I'm glad you said hitbox because that's the next thing on my list. The
Yeah,
hitboxes in this game can be so terrible at times
yeah.
that this is the thing that I think my eyes opened up to most playing it in current day versus back then. Like, of course, I would have remembered. Oh, these claptraps. The claptraps are the worst, by the way, because you will jump on them, and sometimes they'll just hit you, and you just will have no idea. Or you will jump on a
Oh
claptrap,
no.
it will hurt you, and its sprite is turned around the opposite way where it was running. And you're like, what the hell happened there? Now, obviously, there's probably some way where it makes sense in the programming code, but to the player, it doesn't make sense a lot of the times. And I think the hitboxes, I feel that they really improved upon that in the future games. From that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping we don't get to those games and we're like, oh man, the hitboxes are still really dodgy.
Look, the way I remember it is Donkey Kong Country, not Tropical Freeze or Returns. I think they're pretty good. And I can't kind of wait to get to those games because having played those games recently, I'm almost like, oh, are they better games? But we'll save that discussion. But my recollection of it, and I'm willing to go out on a limb on this, is that the whole trilogy has issues, but I remember even back in the day, back then, number 1 certainly has more issues. And number 2 and 3 of their era, it's probably almost on par with a lot of, games back then. They just weren't as finely tuned as they are now. Whereas number 1, there was, same as you. Like, there's times where I'm hitting enemies, I'm like, what? Like, why did I die? Like, what? And it's like, I think I'm hitting them a little bit too far forward, even though the animation looks like it should be fine. And it just gives you that sense of being really inconsistent and just not fair, which I hate in games when things don't feel fair. But yeah, like it's a real funny one. And it's probably, to me, actually the thing that annoyed me most about the game, more than anything, more than the length or, the clunky systems or, and actually, hey, we haven't even talked about this, the boss fights.
That's literally the next thing on my list.
The Dark Soul level boss fights.
That is... It's like you're reading my list, the exact order of what's on there. So I basically have written down bosses are terrible other than K. Rool. And not only are they terrible, but they recycle 2 of them. And they're all too easy until K. Rool.
It's like, they're just shocking. Like, bizarre. Like, they're either just sine waves coming at you or things coming right down, and I don't think I died on any of the bosses up to K. Rool.
No, they're all ridiculously easy. I'd say the second, whatever, I don't know, bird that shoots the things, that is a little trickier than the others. But it's the thing with these is also with that bird, the RNG. I got stuck in a cycle where it was appearing at the top of the screen on both sides. It appeared like 6 times in a row, both sides. And I'm like, come on, just the RNG on this is horrible. Now, obviously, it's not everyone's going to have that experience. But I remember watching speedruns at AGDQ of this game, and everyone's like, "Oh no, let's hope we get good RNG for this boss fight."
So that is RNG, because I've always got a god complex, and I always think I can control these things. So I was like trying to jump up and do a few things to try to control it. So I didn't realize it's more just an RNG thing.
No, I believe, yeah. I remember when I was watching one of those runs, they talked about, just like the boss. Some of the bosses in that game are just run killers because you can get a bad cycle. But the thing is, right, with the K. Rool fight, I love the K. Rool fight. I think it's great. It's a little annoying because I actually died quite a bit on the last cycle that he does, and so I had to go through the part where the cannibals drop down so many times, and that's so easy that I was just like, oh god, just get the cannibals over with, come on. But other than that, I love that fight, and that fight set the scene for the future games, which have great boss fights.
Yeah.
So,
and again, that's where I'm coming from. That I just, so I want to address the K. Rool fight before, shitting on the game again, which is very unfair. I didn't think the K. Rool fight was that good. I feel like it's only good from a context that the other boss fights were just so bad that actually having a boss that does something different, it's like, oh wow, this is amazing. Like, you're actually doing stuff. Again, like, back then, the games used to have really tough boss fights, but like the K. Rool one, there's just times where you have to be positioned in a certain way or else you almost just can't react to what K. Rool's about to do. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, the K. Rool fight is something you're going to die on him until you know that. Well, you're not going to die on him because he's just going to press rewind. But
correct.
Specifically the last, he basically goes through like 3 different rounds, and they've got the cool mechanic where you beat him and then he goes to the credits and then he comes back. That's cool. I'm so glad that you didn't have to go to the credits each time you replayed.
Oh, by the way, I thought the game was over, and I thought, oh, this is kind of weird credits. I don't remember this, and maybe they're going to roll the real credits after this and put the Switch down.
Oh, what? Oh my god, that just goes to show you never had played this game first as a kid. Didn't they do the same thing in number 2?
I can't remember, man. I got a bad memory for this kind of stuff.
Okay, anyway.
I got a real bad memory for this kind of stuff.
I really like the K. Rool boss fight. When you think about it, they're like boss fights in platformers weren't that great back in the day. So I think this actually was pretty good. But the thing is, the future games, especially, I love the boss fights in number 3 so much. The boss fights in the other games just stump all over this, though. So, but one thing outside of bosses that I didn't mention was I mentioned claptraps. The fact that they throw jumping claptraps at you, I just remember writing down a note like jumping claptraps can F off. Like, come on. Like, also, just there's certain sections in the game where there's enemies that only Donkey Kong can kill, for instance. By jumping
that annoyed me, man.
And they've positioned some levels where it's very difficult if you don't have Donkey Kong to actually get anywhere. Like, you have to be so good at the game to be able to actually get past as Diddy Kong. And I'm not a fan of that at all. I think that it's fine to have like bonuses like extra, bonus barrels or bananas and stuff to get, I can only get those Donkey Kong because that enemy's blocking it. That's fine, but I think you shouldn't have to have a character be able to progress through a level. And I don't think that's the case at all in the sequels. I think, no, I think that generally it's always just like, well, if you don't have Dixie, you can't get this bonus. It doesn't stop you from actually easily progressing if you don't have one of the Kongs.
Well, that's true, but I still think that that's true in this game. Like, you can get through it. It's just extremely difficult, but...
when I say extremely difficult, there's like ridiculously... There's one section where there's... I don't know if they're crushers or the ones with the hard hats, where they're actually blocking the platform if you only can kill them with Donkey Kong. So
that's like the one with fuel or something like that, right?
Yeah, that was that level, which is platform peril. That's the worst level in the game.
Oh, really? So I didn't think it was that bad. It was just because I didn't mind the mechanic. I thought it was at least a bit different.
I'm fine with the fuel mechanic. I did not like the having to pick up the barrels to kill the enemies each time. Now, the actual main reason issue I had was there was just some of the design decisions in that level led me to having to swap between Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong all the time, which I kind of felt annoying because, like, if I jumped on one of those enemies with a hard hat as Diddy Kong, it then bounced me off the platform and I died, and I did that so many times, and I'm just like, oh, I bloody hate this level. I like the idea of having to refuel that platform. Like, that's one thing we didn't mention about the good. Like, they came up with so many cool gimmicks, and that kind of set the mold for the future sequels of, hey, there's going to be gimmicks that are specific to one level and one level only. And or we might, for instance, instead of instead of jumping with the mine cart, you're going to jump out of the mine carts, or they kind of mix up those gimmicks. So it's really, really cool what they did with that. But that platform peril level, some of the enemy placements in that were horrible.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's kind of one of the weakest parts of this game, with just, having a bit of cheapness about it. But, yeah, I agree with you. It's very similar to Mario, where, they'll introduce a gimmick for a level, and then they just never bring it back. And, a lot of other games, that gimmick will be the whole game. Whereas, they just do one thing, and it's like, okay, we do it once, or... and I feel like it's probably a little bit more repeated in Donkey Kong Country. Like, they'll have minecart levels and then riff on that idea. All those kind of stage levels, and they'll kind of go and riff on that idea again.
But I'm talking about the fact that they've got, like, a barrel that turns lights on. You never see that in the other levels. It's just in that one level, so...
Yeah, and that level seemed like... I don't know, there's something about it that seemed really odd. It reminded me of Oddworld for some reason, stylistically.
Okay.
Did you kind of, do you know where I'm coming from with that, or
no idea where you're coming from on that? What I will say about
those
those
enemies
levels
just looked really odd, and like, I don't know, it just seemed very like strange to me. I don't know.
I played this game before I played Oddworld, so that if anything, I'd feel probably the opposite way. But But what I really like is actually how they graphically handled turning the lights on and off. And there's also the level where I think it's in a cave where there's minimal light as well. It's really, really cool. And even they have the I forget the name, the bees, like zingers or stingers or something. You can see the eyes of them in the light. You can't see the rest of them. It's like really cool things like that. But I guess to go back to probably my last, thought about what I don't like as much about the game is I think the early levels, probably the first two worlds, some of those levels are a bit boring. I don't think that's just me, but I don't think it was like they're badly designed or anything, because a lot of those levels are the ones that people fondly remember in the jungle. But some of them are just so simple, and they have like barrels that will boost you halfway through the level anyway. So I think that they pick up the challenge, which is good. So I much prefer the second half of the game than, like, let's say, the first half.
Yeah, for me, if I was to break the game up into 3 acts, I feel that probably the second act would be the best, because that's kind of when you're getting up to the minecart levels, because they don't come right at the start. The difficulty increases, because I totally agree. The start of the game is really kind of like boring almost. Like, I wasn't using much of my rewind function at all at the start of the game. I was just kind of getting through it, and I'm like, oh my god, like, was this game that easy? I don't remember it being this easy.
Yeah, I don't think I lost a life in the first two worlds, and that made me go, what's going on here? And then they picked it up.
Like, when I played that first boss, I was like, really? Like, I kind of remembered how bad it was, but Jesus, it's bad.
One thing I'll say about bosses is that the sprites were nice. They were nice big sprites, but they were horrible bosses.
And like, just kind of, from an overall perspective from me about this game, and I was trying to find the right movie analogy for some reason, and I think it's because in video games, although there are a lot of trilogy video games kind of bust through that most of the time and get up to like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, countless games in the sort of series. Whereas movies, it just feels a lot more common that you have trilogies. And I always consider these games a trilogy, and then the stuff that that came later, like Donkey Kong Country Returns, it's kind of like a continuation, but it's not a direct continuation on from Country in my mind. And there was 2 things that came to mind. And I think it's a bit of a blend of these 2 things. So, like, bear with me a little bit. I feel like Donkey Kong Country to Donkey Kong Country 2 is a mix between a bit like Evil Dead to Evil Dead 2 and Back to the Future and Back to the Future 2. Where, the third one in that series is a little bit different. It's still, in the series, in the vein of the series, but it's different. Whereas the sequels, to me, are just better movies than the first, and in some ways kind of a rehash of the same thing, but just executing everything better. And that's kind of ultimately what I think about this game. That it's kind of a weird one. It's a quick game, so it's like definitely a game you can get through. But I just think if you play Donkey Kong Country 2, you're going to get everything from that you need to get from this game from Donkey Kong Country 2, and it's just a better game. Like I don't think you're missing anything. Is kind of ultimately where I'm coming from. And I'd almost think of the same about like, you know, Evil Dead and Back to the Future. It's like, sure, you definitely can go watch those, but the sequels are just, to me, better. And like, you know, you don't need to watch it if you don't need to.
See, it's funny to me because I prefer Evil Dead to Evil Dead 2.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
Oh, Evil Dead 2 is like, the thing is, they're very different. So it's, you know, it's not like they're very comparable in a lot of ways because they're just so different in tone.
Yeah, sure. But I mean,
like Evil Dead 2 is a lot more slapstick than Evil Dead 1.
Definitely.
But
100%.
we're going back to, I guess, like comparing it to Donkey Kong. I kind of agree. I do think there are a few standout levels and of some of the music that you would miss out on by not playing number one. But I think if you're going to play any game in the series, then number 2 is a good choice. And obviously, number 3 to me has the best levels by far, in my opinion. But we'll get to that if we look at those games. But number 2 is almost the quintessential Donkey Kong Country game. I just almost wish, you know, and obviously it's not the case, and it's the same number 3. I almost wish there was a way to play as Donkey Kong in number 2 after you beat it. But maybe we'll chat about that when we look at number 2.
And I totally agree. Like that's ultimately, and the levels aren't designed around that, but yeah, that's one weird thing of the series. And I was actually really scratching my head trying to think of a movie that had the main characters who changed in a trilogy, like to actually try to find the right analogy for it, because it is odd. Like I can't think of too many trilogies where there's not one single character, a protagonist that is consistent all the way through. You know, like you've got Donkey and Diddy as a protagonist, then you've got Diddy and Dixie, and then you've got Dixie and Kitty. Is that right? Yeah. Like that's weird, right? Like that's weird.
Yeah. The good thing about Kitty is that he kind of feels like Donkey Kong, and
definitely.
also the fact like the bouncing across water mechanic is so cool. That's something that anyway we'll let's save that discussion when we get there. But it is interesting, but it's kind of good. I guess a good way to mix it up and provide a newer experience. It's not just rehashing the same from the previous game. So.
And I think given that you cannot play Donkey Kong Country is just in your Nintendo Switch Online subscription, definitely play it. Like if you haven't played this game, you should have a crack at it. It's a great game. Like even 2020 standards for me, it still holds up.
Oh yeah, just mind some of the horrible hitboxes and questionable level decisions.
Yeah, no, true.
Cool.
Was there anything else you wanted to mention about Donkey Kong Country?
One last thing. So when you beat the game, Cranky talks to you and he says,
yes.
Check your banana hoard, you'll be in for a surprise. And I'm thinking, I've spent this whole game defeating enemies in giant banana hoards, reclaiming my bananas. In what way am I going to be surprised that I've got all the bananas back? I know I've got all bananas back. Why is it a surprise? It just didn't make sense to me. And I'm like, why? It's so stupid what he says. Anyway.
Oh, so, I thought you were going to mention something else that was very, I guess, infamous in this game with Cranky.
Okay, what is that?
Do you know about the Cranky Run?
Cranky Run. No, you can indulge me. Not indulge me, sorry. Enlighten me.
So there's a little thing, and it really actually made me go, oh, that's funny. That at the end of the game, Cranky is like rocking back and forth, and he said, I did this using one life in 60 minutes.
Oh, yeah, okay, I get it.
Like, did you see that line when you finished the game?
Yeah, so is that why you used the replay, the rewind to do it in one?
No, I don't even think I finished in 60 minutes with
Oh,
the rewind.
damn it. That would have been good.
So, yeah, like, you know, there was a very infamous thing because, you know, back then, you know, remember when these games came out, and again, our friend Danny said that you could play as K. Rool, and I fully believe this.
He was a
troll.
no, not troll, and I'm trying to think of the right word. He was like not jokester, but he was like the ultimate like trying to come up with schemes, you know, like a schemer.
He was a schemer. So this stuff back in the day when you read this, you saw it in the game. You know, it goes, you know, Cranky's, I did this in one life in 60 minutes. So many people spend so long trying to do this. And it turns out, like, and this came through the completionist challenge, and he got in contact with Rare, or like ex-members, and they actually did want to introduce like a special mode where you play as Cranky Kong if you beat the game in under 60 minutes with one life, but never got around to doing it. But they forgot to kind of remove that line, or it was just kind of like left in there.
Well, that line makes sense because it's just Cranky's just always talking about how much better he was and how much better the old games were. Because we didn't say before that Cranky is the original Donkey Kong. So
yes, we haven't mentioned that. Yes.
Yeah.
Can you explain the lineage of Donkey Kongs?
I'm not going to get into that. All I know is that I believe you can you play Cranky Kong in Tropical Freeze, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's cool that they finally actually because the future, like when you look at Donkey Kong 64, which was the next Donkey Kong game after Donkey Kong 3, you know, you definitely couldn't play as like Funky Kong or Cranky Kong. So it's cool they kind of brought those classic characters back for the retro studios games. So
yeah, because he has a mechanic like Scrooge McDuck in DuckTales with a stick.
Awesome, but no, fantastic game. Yeah, give it a go. You know, if you don't want to play the whole thing, just play through the first couple of worlds. I think it gives you a good taste of the game, and you'll get through some of the cool soundtrack as well. So,
yeah, definitely awesome. Well, that really wraps us up for the episode this week. If you do want to reach out to us on Twitter at BigWigPod, or post in our YouTube comments. We'll surely reply to you. Was there something you wanted to mention, Swinny?
No, I think we're done. I think.
Oh, sorry.
Big Wig is over. No, I didn't say anything.
Sorry. And make sure that you give us a 5-star review or a thumbs up on your podcast service, because that will really help us grow the podcast. With that, bye-bye.
See ya.